All right, we're unmuted.
Okay, it is 5:01 on September 23rd, and this is a work session for the Board of Trustees. Melina, why don't we do a roll call? That's okay, thank you.
Trustee Halverson.
Here.
Trustee Gardner.
Here.
Trustee here. Trustee Wakefield.
Here.
George is absent. Mayor Pro Tem Harper.
Here.
Mayor Cranker.
Here. Jim, we appreciate your dedication there. All right, Gloria, I'm going to kick it over to you for our budget work session.
Okay, so I broke down this agenda memo into some slides to talk through with some more graphs to kind of visualize what we're chatting about. But we'll start off with kind of our overview of what's led to our current situation with the budget. We've had over $2 million spent since 2022 on personnel costs, supporting the refuse and sewer funds, and then grant matches and capital projects. So all these combined is about $2 million over the last couple of years. I think one thing that I see on here is a lot of capital improvements, and we don't have our capital improvements plan. And so I have just published in the utility committee meeting a capital improvements plan that will hopefully help us organize these and strategize for them in the future with any additional funding that came up. But this was a really intentional use of our funds during that time as we were seeing, money coming in from 2022 or 2020 and from COVID, and reinvesting back into our community for the first time in a really long time. So before I started, there were 10 administrators in 7 years. So thinking about, just kind of the state of our finances at that time, the state of our town at that time, and really giving that community some wins, some projects, showing them that we can work for them, basically. So some of those projects are the Zanoni property. That was our grant match on there, that 98,000. The perimeter trail savings 2 years in a row. Anisi Park was a huge expense on our part, but also now we have a building in perpetuity and actual showers, and yeah, it's been a great project. I think one thing too with capital improvements that we could do better on is anticipating the maintenance costs coming up. I think that one thing that kind of shocked us this year is, yes, we have a building, but we now have to think about security. We now have to think about showers, replacement of toilets that are being vandalized and stuff like that. So really anticipating those maintenance costs in our next capital improvements. And then and now we have the Anisi Park loan payment, $95,000 a year. We have and so that'll be in perpetuity. We have the Kendall deck on here as well. So we budgeted $175,000 this year. Broke it up into 2 phases, and I'll talk more about phase 2 later. And then our unexpected kind of Kendall lift price tag this year. So all of that adding up to where we are at now. Any questions on that portion?
I just wanted to add that I was looking back at our 2023 budget memo, and it literally says the goal of 2023 is to spend down the ending fund balance on prioritized projects in town. So just to calm everybody that this was not unanticipated, this was not unexpected. It's just that unfortunately you guys now get to be the board that gets to say, okay, how do we tighten it up when we were having a couple of years of really making strong investments, which is not pleasant, but it was intentional.
Okay. So this is a couple graphs. The graph on the top is our expenditures over the years, so 2019 to what we have currently budgeted for 2025. I would encourage anyone who wants to follow along with some of these graphs and stuff, you can go on our ClearGov site. So it's ClearGov /Silverton. And you can kind of dig into the details here. And I do have published right now the draft 2025 budget, which is in your packet right now. And then we have our revenue sources there. And as you can see, like both expenditures and revenues have increased over the years. And now we're looking to kind of bring that back down. I will bring your attention to the fiscal year 2023 fund balance that's on there, $1,116,139. And then we had projected to spend down the 2023 fund balance by $674,000. And that leaves us with an ending fund balance this year of $441,000. One thing I do want to point out on here is that these ending fund balances does not account for our $500,000 that we have in CDs for reserves. So I'll be showing you some more slides, and it looks like we have a very small fund balance, but actually we have that 500,000 for reserves. So if you're thinking about that reserve number of 850,000 that I put in the memo, that's in there. But basically, as you can see here, we are still spending down. We are still $207,000 over our revenue in expenditures. So that's the key point here. And it's kind of a philosophy for you all to think about as well. I want to see a balanced budget. I want the expenditures to match the revenues. But that might not be the philosophy of the entire board. So any questions on this one? Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to walk through a couple of the items in the budget, like personnel expenses. We reduced this by 4.18% from 2024. This eliminates a couple of seasonal positions, eliminates a lot of our current. Well, actually, that's just for the positions. And then unfortunately, we had a 13.5 increase this year in our health insurance. And this was due to we are part of a small pool of, or a pool of small communities that share health insurance. And we had large claims in all of our communities. So that drove our price up significantly. In years past, it's only been about like a 5%, 4% increase. So this was kind of a shocker for us. But better to know now and start planning for it.
And for benefits, we just cover staff.
We only cover the employee. Yes. Yeah, it's actually really not very affordable if you want to add a family member. No one has a family member on their plan anymore. So,
yeah. And this current budget, so you've reduced these expenditures, health insurance has gone up, and the current budget proposed in the previous part, the 3.4 million, does not include cost of living increases.
That is correct. That is not in this draft of the budget. The bare bones budget, as I'm saying, is being presented. And then another thing is administration fees from water, sewer, mullis, and refuse has been reduced as an income for the general fund, 195,000. So if you go back to that previous slide that I was on, and I wanted to balance the budget by that 200,000 mark, that's where the 200,000 mark's coming from. So if you think about, I do believe that these are more of like a better way to calculate our administration fees. Unintentionally, our refuse went up from this though, which is something that I'm asking if I can adjust so that it does help balance it. But I still wouldn't advocate for keeping the same administration fees that we've had. I think we have to wean ourselves off of these administration fees, which might mean a negative, like more spending than revenues for our first year, but have a plan for how we're going to recover that in the years, in the next subsequent years.
Yeah, I think it's just like relevant for the community members to know, like on this one side, we're trying to make our enterprise funds solvent and sustainable. And one of the tools in levers we talked about using is, not just increasing fees on ratepayers, but also decreasing our administrative fees. But now we all have to contend with the fact that that affects our general fund balance, and we all have less money to spend on things that we have to spend on. So it's challenging.
Any other questions on this? Christian? Okay. Okay, so we're shooting for that 25% of general fund. And this is in our financial policies that we have drafted but not adopted yet. But kind of a best practice and also a policy decision by the board. So this is me recommending a policy decision through that financial document that the finance committee has discussed. I don't think I brought it to the full board yet. So reserves around 25% of general fund. I think last year when I was talking about this, I was thinking all the funds. So I took our aggregate of $6 million and was like, oh, we need 25% of this, which is actually a huge number. And we don't need to save as much, but it's better to be conservative when you're learning than to be just spending. So I kind of put in here an ending fund balance goal should be around 350,000. So we have that 850,000 in reserves in case anything happened.
So we have the 500,000 in CDs and then our
Yeah.
fund balance be 350.
And what I want to point out here is in 2023, we moved that $500,000 into reserves. So when you see this ending fund balance, it is reduced in 2024 by 500,000 and in 2025 by 500,000 because those are accounted for in our reserves moving forward.
Because they used to be on the general fund side.
Yeah, and in my memo, I did say, you know, we'll have some predicted 2024 ending fund balances in November. And maybe that could be a good time to add, I spelled recommending wrong. Okay, add those items back in. But in reality, we still are spending $200,000 over our expenditures. So keep
Over our revenue.
over our revenue, yeah. So our expenditures are still 200,000 over our revenue, no matter what our ending fund balance comes in next year. This might help pad things if we do have to spend down into that, but the goal is not to. And feel free to jump in anytime with questions. It's a work session for you all, so. Some of the increases that have been included in the draft are, like we've talked about, health, dental, vision, life insurance. Those are all under that 13.5%. And then financial administration's up a small amount, but it does affect the bottom line. We are paying off one of our Caterpillar leases. So we have a balloon payment this year or next year due of 85,000. And then this is one that I wanted to kind of pass by you all. So in this full work session, I really want to get feedback on, is this the right direction that I'm going with the budget? Philosophy wise, like, is this fitting with the board's philosophy on how you want to spend the town's funds? And then what I'll do is I'll go back, make the necessary changes and present a first draft to you all on October 14th. That is my deadline set by the state. It's actually October 15th is my deadline to notice a public meeting for the first draft of the budget so that it shows I'm doing my job and that there's adequate time for the public to comment prior to adoption. So that's really kind of what I'm trying to get out of you. So as you're going through these, there might be line items that you want to like bring up or call out. And we can go through that after I go through this big overview. But the increase in the public works admin, so this is for the anticipated overlap of public works directors, a PTO payment, but what I didn't include in there was a possible housing stipend. So looking at potentially when I came on, a housing stipend was offered to me for $5,000. Really helped me get into the community. It was actually $5,000 the first year once I was either under contract or signed a lease. And then I got $5,000 after a year of being in service and still living in the town. So something similar might help us attract a potential candidate that position will be posted tomorrow. We have looked at promoting from within and, at this point, I think we're gonna see who's out there first. To see if we can't attract someone, with some of the skills that we're needing out of this position. We are looking at separating out the operator position, from this so that we could potentially not have such a burdensome position, like we don't want to overwhelm anyone off the right out of the gates without being able to pay them. So I don't know if it actually apply.
Go ahead. Liz.
Oh, so we're just gonna split that role into two. So,
No, not at this time. No, we're going out. So we are taking off the operator from that role.
okay,
And that was kind of the anticipation, what we wanted to do anyways, but we were thinking of doing that kind of permanently. So that this role eventually could get those certifications, but we wouldn't necessarily ask that of their first year. So we're training up a couple of the other guys to have that operator. And that would be an increased pay for them, which isn't budgeted for yet. But we are reducing the overall salary right now, without those requirements.
are we paying for the trainings as well?
What's that?
Are we paying for the trainings as well?
Yeah, and so that's the $30,000 overlap for 2 months with the Public Works Director and the new Public Works Director, potentially. So that is in there right now. The only thing that's not in there is like a housing stipend or something like that. And then increase in legal services. This was increased by $10,000 to help with the land use application since we're getting rid, or since we potentially don't have the budget for the contracted planners. And then personal line item, contracted water, wastewater. Oh, yeah. And so this is the next line item is a contract for the water and wastewater certified operations until we get the 2 gentlemen that we in Public Works trained up for that role. And that would be with the current Public Works Director. Try not to use names. And then a big change this year that I've been talking about for years, how to do this, but all facilities will now be charged their disposal fee instead of it being lumped in with the refuse costs. So that was about $27,000 broken out for each of those, and we can go through that in a minute. So I tried not to make any assumptions in this year's budget. I tried to take out everything that doesn't keep the lights on or that we don't already have a contract for. But I probably missed something in there. So if I did, let me know. But basically, these are items that I didn't include in this first draft. The first being, and then they have little asterisks next to them. So if it has an asterisk and it indicates that this would be anticipated for 2025, wasn't included in 2024, or was included, but in a different way, like the cost of living raises. So I didn't put a number there yet, if that is something that, well, I'll just kind of go through this. So there's a parks lead position, which we took out this year. And poor Sarah, I'm sorry. That is not included in the current draft. Then we had conceptualized a full-time fire and code enforcement officer. Right now, all that's in there is a $20,000 part-time position for a fire inspector for the summers. What we don't have in there yet is the revenue potentially from charging for fire inspections, which most municipalities do charge for fire inspections. So we're kind of gathering the data right now for that.
Question.
Yeah,
You're talking about cost of living. Do you also do merit raises or just cost of living?
we just do cost of living.
Okay. And then you're looking at the full-time fire inspector, that will not go to the building inspector then? That has been done in the past?
No, we were hoping to separate that out. But in a pinch, he has offered to take the exam and go through that. With the increase of code enforcement issues and the separation of duties from a fire inspector to a building code enforcement officer, I would like it to be a separate position, the fire inspector, but we might have to end up with it being in one position.
So,
And, oh, go ahead, Amy.
so the fire and code enforcement officer, that's fire inspector and also the one who's enforcing our policies.
Yeah, and so they would help with the capacity of our code enforcement.
Right, yeah, okay.
And so what we've done in the past is we share we share a building inspector with the county and a fire inspector for town.
Mhm.
And the building inspector also did some code enforcement in partnership with the sheriff's department.
Correct.
And so we don't have a full-time of any of these things.
Right,
Yeah.
correct.
And have we seen an increase in building? I know 2021 and 2 were pretty crazy with building inspections and permits and all that. I mean, I know it's dropped down a little bit, but are we kind of at a new normal?
Well, and I showed you all a graph a while, I don't remember whose graph or what work session we were at, but basically, oh, it was our joint work.
County,
Yeah.
yeah, because
Was it our joint one? And basically it stayed pretty steady, but sometimes there's more work in the county than there is the town. So this year it's a lot more in the county than it is in town. The last couple of years, it's been more work in town than in the county.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see a full-time code enforcement officer eventually, just being on the Board of Adjustments or cost 2 meetings. It's a big job for just one having everything.
Mhm.
Well, and I think a point to ruminate on might not be for this line item, but our current contract with the sheriff's department includes code enforcement. Not just for traffic or criminal, but for all code. So having conversations, I know you've had good conversations, Gloria, with our building inspector and with sheriff's department about kind of like division of labor, right? If it's in our sheriff's contract, then how do we make sure that works okay? But then I hear a lot, like Amy's probably referring to, that I think community members would like more code enforcement consistently. But right now we have a quarter-time code enforcement person, plus the sheriff's department who's dealing with increased visitors and people. So. Yeah.
Another thing, oh, are we good? We can keep talking about that.
well, we've also just had an issue recently with code enforcement and like leaving the town open to like liability.
Yeah.
So having additional capacity there is always good. And if there was additional capacity for enforcement, is there additional like revenue that could be generated from that enforcement?
Yeah, and some ideas that have been shot down in the past is, like maybe that person is in charge of a meter system. And
Yeah.
we have meters as well. And yeah.
Parking meters or water meters?
Oh, parking meters.
Yeah.
Then the Anisi Park attendant, we took off. We contracted with the chamber this year and feel like we could do an automated system in that area, which was kind of always the goal. But now we're just kind of doing it without funding. So more QR codes to scan, that kind of thing. Then in our contracted services, getting rid of a lot of our contracted services here, or not including them in this budget. I don't want to say getting rid of, I just want to say not including at this point, because I could give you my recommendations of what really needs to go. But honestly, we need to think about a balanced budget. So this is an overview of what I've taken out or what I didn't put in and we wanted to put in.
Right. And again, recognizing that we're still within the context that even without adding any of these things, we're $200,000 away from balancing our budget.
Yeah.
Let's just picture the reality for a minute.
So we've used community planning strategies as our contracted planners for the last couple of years. And they've really helped train up Lucy, our community development director, and feel like I feel like she can take the helm at this point. And then only using them for complex projects, which we have a pass-through policy now in place, to be able to basically use them as needed, and that would come from the complex like development that's happening.
I feel really good about this line item because I think we had a period of time, 3 years when we didn't have Lisa Dare with her experience and we had kind of this gap and we had incredible building happening and we had huge projects coming down the line. So the build out analysis, Shrine Hill, development at the entrance of town, annexation, land use code rewrite, like I think it was super great investment to utilize them for a period of time, but it seems like it feels like a great point at which we can say, okay, this was great. We needed this level of investment for now, and now we can kind of move to handling this in-house. So I like that.
And then we do have the NEC bathroom cleaning contract, which we approved this year, and taking that out at this point. We did a preliminarily, we did approve the SMPA Go Green program early, as something that we could put in our budget. So that's in here right now, not in the actual budget. So.
And the NEC bathroom cleaning contract would then go to Sarah's.
Yes.
That was my question. I was like, are we just not gonna clean the bathroom?
So the additional duties go to her and we've.
Taken away a staff member.
Staff job.
Yep.
But that,
That makes sense.
the other stuff, I'm just wondering if there's any ways.
Yeah, so we are, I am putting, refuse all on Public Works moving forward. So there'll be a transition period this winter with the new Public Works Director. But because Sarah has been dealing with Bruin for this summer, and we will make that transition period over to the Public Works Director to take on refuse.
What was that, increased 41% since 2019?
Yes, we will hit that in a minute here. Okay, and the next one's fireworks.
Sorry, can we,
Yeah.
what the Go Green program is?
Yeah. What's that?
Oh, just like why would we cut out the Go Green program or like not?
Well, it's never been added in the past. This was proposed at a finance committee meeting. And they said if we can fit it into our budget, we'll fit it into our budget. So that's why it's currently in the not included draft items.
Yeah.
With an asterisk. So.
And the SMPA Go Green program doesn't have any real connection to our award that we just received.
Not connection to that, but it does play well if we are going to be asking SMPA to apply for grants for us. So there's that aspect of it.
I think this also does count towards our emissions reduction goals for the.
Yep. Yeah, it could help with our climate action plan as well, so.
Which taking then some action there would help with additional
Funding.
Mhm. Yeah. Then we have for events, I kind of tried to segment these out, but we have events, fireworks and snowscapes, that 40,000. I did ask you all for an answer to the fire department before October 1st. But I totally understand if we can't do that. I mean, to prioritize something over all the others could be kind of unfair, but wanted to just put in their deadline there if we had some kind of a agreement on that.
I thought it said September 24th, they need to know by. Is that?
Yeah, that's tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. Yeah. I mean, for me, I just have trouble justifying paying $40,000 for the fireworks if we're going to cut Summer Sounds, if we're going to cut the Creative District. It just, both of those things are great for the community. It just doesn't seem just to do one, not the other, in my opinion.
And we're still trying to decide if we need a balanced budget or not.
Right. So I'm going to present all this to you. You don't have to make a decision right now. And then we can talk through kind of the philosophy of a balanced budget or not.
Yeah, I think it's helpful because again, these are kind of the things that we all have values judgments on, right? For better, for worse, that's kind of how it works. And so I think it'd probably be good to go through these so we're all operating on the clear assumptions of what isn't included, so we know what the bare bones is. And then we probably need to kind of step back and say, okay, what really philosophically are we talking about here? In what direction do we want to go? And do we want to do this over time and how we're decreasing? And so it seems, instead of getting into each line, I mean, I think you should keep going through them, but I think as we have the kind of values decision making, maybe that comes in a little bit.
Sure. Yep, and that's why Summit Sounds is in here, definitely a value decision making there. We already have discussed the nonprofit requests, and then took out our partners, Creative District and Salmon Development Association. Took out ClearGov, budgeting software, with the Transparency Center. Took out the transfer to the Housing Authority. This would have been requested this year. I included their budget in this work session, so you guys can see kind of what they're planning on. We are definitely still working on making that a sustainable authority, but we'll need help from the town, in future projects. Silverton Single Track Society, we had talked about making them a partner last year. That's why they're not included with the nonprofit requests. So they're singled out there. Enhancement of current facilities. I'm hoping that our capital improvements plan will provide more clarity on this to really schedule those repairs out. Vehicle purchase for Parks and Rec and Building and Code. I know that we wanted a dedicated vehicle for Parks and Rec, and Building and Code uses their own vehicle for everything and refuses to give me a mileage report. So that's where we're at right now. Taking all that on. And then, yeah, just the opportunity grant match. I always throw that one out there, to have something to apply with. I don't know if less than 50,000 is worth it, honestly, with a lot of grant matches, honestly. Typically more than that.
Sorry, if I interrupt. So opportunity grant match, that's not a specific.
That's not, yeah, that would be any grants coming up and,
Yeah.
oh, look, we saved 50,000 and we can apply for that.
Okay.
We can also do that with excess fund balance as well. That is defined in our drafted financial management policies. Which I probably should have included in this, which we'll have another little get together on.
This is just the beginning of the budget, folks.
And then Blair Street grant match is not included in the current draft as well. Right. That's equating to about $900,000 plus of projects that could potentially be added back in, depending on what your philosophy ends up as.
$900,000 doesn't do anything about cost of living because it's to be determined.
Right.
Yeah.
So plus is the key there. The items that I've not been updated is our workers' comp insurance. I don't see this as a huge increase. Sheriff's budget, I did meet with the sheriff the other day, but he didn't have a solid budget number yet. So he didn't say he was requesting more staff at this time, so I'm anticipating that to be pretty much the same. Shared services, Willie and I have not gone through our little back and forth on what the shared services were this year, so we will be doing that. And then the fire authority's budget, they estimated a $3,000 increase, I think, for both entities. So that has been included actually in this one.
Mhm.
All right, I'm gonna run through each one of our funds real quick so you can see this. Thought it was fun to do our ending fund balances on each of these, especially after we have implemented. So the assumptions in the sewer fund and the water fund is based off of the proposed resolution that will go before the board in a public hearing on October 14th. those would be the new sewer fees. That is combined with the capital, future for capital now. So those are all just one fee now. That was the recommendation of our consultant at our rate study. I've also included a placeholder for the operating line, the operator, so the sewer operator, in 2025. I have been told by the current Public Works Director that it will be significantly less than that, what I have put in each of those line items. And he's still working on like what that might look like.
Will we be able to add overage for the wastewater for the sewer fund? I don't think we're currently doing that.
Yeah, so we did that on our last billing cycle. We were getting a lot of calls about that. But we were able to figure out how to do that on as it's defined in the resolution, 2017-01, was the resolution that we readopted for the increase of fees. And that is in that resolution is to, if you are over water, then you'll be over sewer.
Right. And that was implemented with this most recent billing?
Yes. For the meters that work.
Which brings up a whole nother issue.
Mm-hmm.
We need to get on that program. And if we don't see an improvement in 6 months, we need to look at an alternative.
Yes, and so in the utility committee meeting on Wednesday, and the packet just went out, there are price quotes and a overview of the issues that are going on with the meters right now. So we'll be discussing that on Wednesday.
Have the calls been mostly confusion or,
Yes,
okay.
well, and anger.
And yeah, I assumed anger with confusion, but
Even once the confusion is clarified, the anger remains.
yeah.
All right, and so for the water fund, same assumptions, for the new, rates, same line item that's going to need to have an operator in it as well. And then, the updated administration fees have been applied here. Now, when I did my prediction for 2024, based on what we've currently got in, we are slightly negative in our water at the end of this year. So we might have to make a fund balance transfer or look at what the implications of that are for this year. But I think we're going to be okay if we start the increase. I didn't do the increase for 2024. I only did the increase for 2025, but the proposed increase in rates that will come on the October 14th meeting will be for November and December, which should increase our fund balance from there. So I haven't done that. That's why that's in the negative for 2024 ending fund balance.
And the drop off in the bar graph was because we made some significant investments in water in the last couple of years, correct?
No. I'm trying to think what we would have spent up there in the last couple of years.
Well, when did we did, well, we can wait for this for a question for John, but I thought we did have, there were several things that were, well, we had the generator. Didn't we have to do some unexpected tank work?
So the generators came from the ARPA funds, the 84,000 that we received, and those went to the wastewater. Oh, you say the generator for, yes, that one we did purchase, but this is a adjustment that our accountant made and said that we hadn't been calculating the end fund balance correctly. So it wasn't so much an investment or more so an accounting correction.
Okay, so those higher bars to the left were not accurate.
Right.
Okay.
And that was when we brought on our new accountant in 2023. And they looked back at 2022 and 2021 and said this wasn't a correct ending fund balance. And that's when we really had some concerns about our
Waterfront.
water fund.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, and then refuse fund.
That's a great fun graph.
Isn't it a fun graph? Yes, so the expenses in the refuse fund have increased 41% since 2019. We have been working on this since I started in 2021, when I realized that we had a very negative fund balance. We injected some general fund dollars into it in 2022, and that was depleted again in 2023. We have implemented EQR rates. This should increase our revenue by about $100,000 for 2025. And we should see a slight increase this year that hasn't been accounted for in our 2024 number here. So I'm hoping that that helps bring it up a little bit more. But I still, as we adjusted the admin fees, they went from 26,000 to 54,000. So I'm going to need to adjust that again, because we can't adopt a negative fund balance if we can help it. We had hoped to implement the EQRs earlier this year, but we weren't able to get to it until later on. And so that's why it's a lot lower in 2024. And then even separating out those town-owned facilities and programs, we're still looking at a negative fund balance for 2025. So we are looking at, I'm needing help in this area, and I want you to keep this in mind as we look at our bottom line, because we might have to support our refuse fund again. We might have to look at increasing rates, which is probably not very palatable right now, but 41% increase, we are not keeping up with this. And we have really increased the amount of waste that we're producing here, adding dumpsters next to the grocery store, adding dumpsters out at the visitor center, trying to capture all the waste we can, but it's becoming quite an issue for us. And that's another area where I had kind of thought a building and code enforcement, or a code enforcement and fire official could help with as well, would be in the refuse area, adding capacity there, because it has become a beast.
I think this just kind of highlights a thing that stands out to me a lot, which is, again, we have like 600 ratepayers hosting 1 million people or more. We're gonna get some Colorado tourism data, so stay tuned how many people it actually is. But you know, this is a key example of that. We all want to not have trash in the backcountry, so we provide dumpsters around town. We want the refuse to be collected. And yet, like, it's so expensive, and we have very few options as far as providers, and so we're sort of stuck over the barrel.
So are there grants available from the government to help us with trash that's in the backcountry?
And our ways, the things that comes out to my mind a lot is like, how do we help our visitors share the cost of providing the infrastructure to provide the experience? But it's very tricky with Tabor.
And so the code enforcement, the new code enforcement officer would be at the transfer station helping collect those, because a lot of.
That was kind of our goal. Yeah, either that, or we would, Bevan has also, our current code enforcement officer has also expressed interest in helping oversee that as well. So.
Yeah. Because people just, dump it.
And we have seen a shift there with now 2 attendants who take your bags so that they can double check that you're not throwing construction waste into the municipal waste. And, it's getting a little better there. So we do appreciate that help there.
Will that make up for the 40%? I guess we could extrapolate based on the new data of like how many people actually visit. If everyone paid $5, would that make up for it?
Very challenging for community. How do we charge people for the trash?
Yeah.
where? What's the capture point, right? You put a credit card swipe next to it and they just put the bag of trash in it. Take the QR code.
Swipe.
It's coming back. How do you play captured at the point of service? And as a municipality, we have limited options on how many additional fees we can keep adding. You know, do you add it at we already have high sales tax, right? We have our lodging fees. You know, can we implement it more from the lodging side?
Well, now we'll go to the EQRs.
Right.
Just implemented.
Implemented the.
And
that.
we've said that we don't do seasonal, so we will be collecting those year round.
I'm still hearing some county residents aren't being billed for the refuge.
Well, I don't know if we can, if that would make a difference right now, but yes,
The
we're always looking at those little stuff, but we're looking at like, we needed a 41% increase somewhere.
I wonder if it's time to get back to the conversation around, does it make sense to do it ourselves? Are there other service providers that would be open to the conversation? I know we pursued that 2 years ago and it was like a hard pass, but
you're saying we'd municipalize like refuse service.
Because the contracted services from Bruin Waste Management since 2019, you know, it's increased, but have the actual services that they're providing increased as well, or just the fees?
Volume has increased, I would say.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a good point, Dana. Like 2 years might be long enough that maybe there is a competitive bidder now. Like probably not, but it's, you have to consider that, you know?
Like you're saying you could contract out another service or municipalize.
Right, yeah.
either.
Yeah.
Oh, either, right? Is that what, yeah. What year, Gloria, give us a little bit of background in this point on the year that you started conversations and how the conversations went. In a quick summary. Is it 2 years ago?
It was 2 years ago. I approached Phoenix Recycling Waste Management. And those are the two I actually heard back from. And I had good relationships with both of them in Durango as a sustainability coordinator, and both are unable to service us from the south. I have not explored any other waste haulers from the north.
Well, this feels like an issue that we kind of need to tackle from a variety of angles. We've tackled it from the EQR perspective. We've tackled it from the town paying its appropriate share of refuse provided. And maybe it's now to start thinking about, I don't know, do we need a different conversation with the county around shared services and what's kind of at the county level as we continue to see users and more buildings being built out there?
Yeah.
And then thinking about just the overall contract and kind of value for the dollar. What we could do.
Previously, I've had Waste Management. Their rates are a lot more expensive than what we're paying. So if we go with that route, be prepared to get a lot of complaints from a lot of citizens.
Like rates will go up regardless.
It's will go up.
Yeah, right. I mean, Ron brings up a valid point that like our rates have gone up with Bruin, but at the same time, the rate, overall contract rate might be less than other competitors too. So.
Are other communities who see an increase in traffic since COVID also seeing this like increase in? So I'm just like, is this just us? Or is like Ridgeway and Uray also experiencing this level of increase? I'm also thinking about like others, towns like ours that might have experienced like this boom, like is like City or like Creed's gotten really popular, you know, like other small.
Now, Lindsay's got a good point. What do like Uray do with their trash in the county? How's that handled?
They use Bruin, right?
But
Yeah.
how are they paying, the citizens paying for it, or have they worked some deal out?
I don't think they have a different system than us.
And they have EQRs too, I think, right?
Yeah.
When we looked up Molina, yeah, they had EQRs very similar to what we proposed.
They have public trash, like you can throw away your backcountry trash.
In your end.
Yeah.
They do pick up.
They do pick up.
Houses.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's-
bang home.
All right, well, we're not probably gonna solve it tonight, but I just wanted to put this on your radar
Great.
and maybe,
Implications are when we're talking about a balanced budget and we're talking about additional things we might like to spend money on, we can't forget that refuse might need help.
and we might need to do a specific work session on just refuse and how we can go. Okay.
So, sorry, so we're at 200, trying to figure out how we get this like 200 number up. Plus the additional 40, or is that already included in the budget, this proposed budget?
Additional 40.
Sorry, this 41% increase.
That's happened.
Okay,
We have it.
yeah, okay,
That's the reality we're living in.
great. I'm just adding up everything in my head.
Yep. Okay. These next funds aren't as bleak. Maybe they'll leave you guys on a positive note. We have budgeted for CDOT wetland project that was approved in 2022, still in contract with CDOT. So I have budgeted for it to be taken out in 2025 at this point. That is its own fund. Can't be spent on anything else. Only, and that's our lottery funds. It's very strict on what we can actually spend that on. So if you're like, why are we spending this on this wetlands project in 2022? It's because it was already approved. We were through the process and it's a very specific fund. Okay. Mullis Park Fund, we are doing really well in this fund. A couple of the capital improvements have been focused on tree health, but we have grown, especially with COVID, over the last couple of years. We did spend it, we'll probably spend it down a little bit with some of the capital improvements next year. And yeah, we're looking really healthy in this fund. Extremely healthy, actually. We are looking at possibly raising rates slightly to keep up with inflation and yeah.
Was it pretty full this summer for reservations? Do we know?
Booked out, right?
Yeah, we did, the issue that happened in January with, the payment system that was down right when we would have gotten our reservations definitely has shown a drop in numbers. But I don't think we're gonna be horribly, like, we won't hit our 200,000 mark that we had. I think when I last checked, it was 150,000 and that was after the August actuals, so.
And most of those payments are done with credit card.
Yep.
So I think I brought it up earlier. Why aren't we doing the 2% surcharge on credit cards when we receive those for payments for the city?
I'm not sure if they do or not. They have their own payment system up there since we contract. So I'd have to double check that.
And I think that's something that would go through the credit card company themselves. I don't know if that's something that we're even allowed to do.
We should be allowed to charge 2% because the credit card companies are taking 2% off of the payments that we
Mhm.
give them.
Right, like you go to a store and they say if you use a credit card, it's 2%.
Mhm.
Yeah. Maybe we could look in if that's an option for revenue. Would that apply to that could apply to online auto pay?
Mhm.
Right? If you're using the
Time you use a
credit card for that. Tack on the fees.
Here, a dollar there.
The whole point of that is just like, that's credit card companies.
Right.
That's
Tacking on the fees.
Tacking on the
Yeah.
fees,
Take-
just trying to recoup.
Covering.
Yeah.
Instead of subsidizing people's costs of
Yeah.
using the credit card, we're making everybody pay it.
Yeah.
Well, that could be something to look into.
Library fund, we spent down, and this is funny because library fund really shouldn't have a fund balance because it's subsidized by the general fund, but we do have a fund balance here. And I think it's fine at 25,000. We did spend it down in 2022 because there was a project, or in 2023 because there was a if you go into the library now, there's a very safe way to get onto the roof now. So
It's a very cool ladder.
it's a very cool ladder. Yep. So, and then we did include refuse in this one. So we're charging each fund refuse. And the same was for Mullis too. Cemetery fund, it didn't include the $20,000 in the 2025 budget. We still need to prioritize reforming the cemetery committee. But we're sitting at around $60,000 left over in this fund. Potentially, we do need to get a survey done. And at some point, we should probably budget for that. I don't remember how much the survey was, but it's a significant chunk.
I think there's old surveys.
They're too old, so we need to get new ones. And that's been requested by the Historic Society and by Molina and Parks and Rec.
I was definitely,
Go on top of people.
I think certain people haven't moved.
Yeah, exactly. There's more.
There's more new ones.
Yeah. So an updated survey, I should say.
I was definitely approached about this at the Historic Society event, so it was high on the Historic Society.
Yeah, and we did put like prioritizing reforming a cemetery committee at some point to prioritize that in the future. And I think this year it's worked pretty well. I mean, we had people were dying to get in after COVID,
Uh-huh.
Oh.
but
It's an hour in the budget. It's, here we are, yeah.
but Melina has kind of created more of a system. Honestly, it's working pretty well.
It works fine, except
I do tell people,
when I go up there with them, that
because it looks like there's
not someone there, that there isn't actually someone there, and
might have to.
move them over a little bit, not the person that's already there, but the new one.
It seems
Survey would really help.
like this is kind of an asset, right? This is
Yeah.
one of our assets. And so moving forward, it seems like the process we have for new clients, new applications is
Residents.
working.
Residents.
Residents is working. But from what I heard from the Historic Society, it seems like having the committee back to really talk about like priorities, right? Like what are the top priorities for investment in this asset?
Yeah, and
Survey, fence, restoration, masonry, whatever kind of needs to be prioritized.
in our capital improvements plan that just went out, there is a cemetery entrance monument in there
Mhm.
to be prioritized by you all.
But it seems like as we think about capital improvements, I would love to have a cemetery committee
Mm-hmm.
with representatives from the Historic Society informing that personally. So I'm not an expert in cemeteries.
Excellent. It's a great asset for our town too. And then finally, Silverton Housing Authority presented a budget that could be reduced. Yeah. So we've got a Housing Colorado annual membership, the conference, the Mountain Housing Coalition. And so that's 2 conferences there. And then grant match and kind of development costs as we look into going into our 2025 building of the townhomes potentially, so. All right, so that is my portion of my presentation. I can go through line by line if you all would like, or if you want to have your kind of philosophy discussion, and then maybe dive into each line item. Happy to do whatever you guys want to do in this. The only thing I need from you is general direction on, yes, you're on the right track. Present us with a budget on October 14th with these recommendations, basically.
I mean, first, I just want to say kudos to the finance committee for the idea of sponsor a Kendall chairlift. I really like that.
Do we, I
I
don't
think
know,
it's-
Jim, we can't take credit for that. We just thought it
It
was a
says
good
the
idea.
finance committee.
Yeah, Sarah recommended. Recommended. I think,
Business owners during the season.
That
That's
would be.
heck yeah.
Yeah, I really, really love that.
29 shares,
Right.
a lot of money.
Oh,
We can also do the Frisbee golf course too, the summer. So
Mm.
all in together.
mhm.
My one request was keeping the glitter chair. You might have to pay extra for the glitter chair.
Extra for the.
Because we are trying to explore kind of fun ways to, or, and just any way really to generate more revenue if we wanted to make up that.
Oh, that's a
That,
great idea.
that-
It's like my cat naming idea, the snow cat.
I think that's
When
great.
snow cat breaks down next time, we have a competition to name the snow cat. Right? Get all the kids involved. Cat make-
Fundraising and.
Patty McCat face.
Yeah.
You know, I think, again, for anybody that's listening, I just think it's really helpful to have all this context. I mean, this isn't a surprise. We've been talking about this for multiple years of how we were intentionally spending down our fund balances and also how our enterprise funds were having challenges. But I think it's easy to get lost in the weeds. It's a lot of information. It's easy to kind of not be able to see the big picture. And so I appreciate, Gloria, what you've really done here. And I think it is hard for the new board because the previous board was kind of able to say, yes, invest in the community. It's post-COVID. Let's inject some cash in our nonprofits. Let's really support our partner organizations. Let's make some investments in assets. And I was just going through, I created a spreadsheet because that's how I have to work. But like, I mean, the fact that in the last 3 years, we've talked about spending down $2 million. I think it's important for the community to know what they got with that money, and the impact that it has. And I think, Gloria, you did a great job of kind of showing where it went, but really thinking about like, we've leveraged grant dollars for big, significant projects. I know people don't feel like there's houses being built over in Anvil, but there are houses being built over in Anvil, and there's big projects moving forward. I think recognizing, we talk about the Blair Street project, but recognizing we've invested $730,000 already in Blair Street. That's a significant investment. It's the first building we've built since Kendall. So that's something we've gotten. $200,000 in assets at Kendall that we've spent. We started work on the perimeter trail. And I just added up, like, what have we spent on our partners and our nonprofits over the last 3 years? Since 2021, we've invested $230,000 in local organizations and events. Like, that's huge. That's huge. I think we also have to recognize that we can't sustain that level of investment. And that's the unfortunate place we're in now, is having to really kind of set those priorities, say, hey, these were some big things that we did to help the community post-COVID, right? To manage increase in visitors and to help recruit and retain staff and not have 10 administrators in 7 years. And now we kind of have to have that philosophical discussion, like, okay, what's next? And so I think it is important, before we even look at like all these lists of the additional things we'd like to do, what really, we kind of need to have the conversation around that $200,000 gap in revenue and expenditures. And I think we can recognize that our fund balance might be higher, right? Our revenues last year might be better than we expected, and our expenses might be lower. And so our actuals from 2024 might be better than we think. And at the same time, as we heard from our accountant, we can't continue to have and approve budgets that are significantly unbalanced. So I don't know, what is everybody thinking as far as these different levers we're pulling with administrative fees, right? We can see we've decreased administrative fees and now we have a $200,000 deficit. But that's important for those funds. So what are you guys thinking as far as kind of how we go forward with our budgeting into the future? Jim, you're smiling. I want to give you an opportunity to jump in because you're sitting in your taxi.
Apparently, I'm going to start my own EMS service. Driving everyone sick down to Durango. At 5:21 this evening, Amy made a very interesting comment, and I wrote it down. I have my pad, taking notes. I agree with her. I agree with what she said. And for those of you that didn't take that note or remember, she's made the comment about cutting fireworks. If summer sounds are going to get cut, she thought that fireworks would get cut. We are local government and we need to focus on local government. And sometimes that forces us to make those tough decisions. And whether it's in our personal lives, business, government, we have to right now cinch the belt, get back to basics, and be the local government that focuses on the roads, the water, the sewer, the parks, the buildings, and providing the best service. But that does, like we've all discussed over the past hour, mean we have to make those tough decisions. Now we've cut what 900,000+ out of the budget. We need to go find another 200,000+ to cut more of. It is my opinion that getting back to basics means making those tough decisions, making those hard decisions, and Gloria has done an incredible job doing that thus far. Whether it's cutting positions, cutting some of the amenities that are real feel-good things, but not necessarily what we need, because right now we need to focus on what are the basic necessities that our local government provides for us. And we're facing that right now, whether it's the refuse fund, like I just said, the parks, the buildings, the roads, water, sewer. And I think we need to cut more. And that's just the nature of the beast at the moment. And next year, if we do a really good job this year and money comes in, we may be able to bring back some of these, as Dana, you like to say, feel good projects. I would love that. I would love to reinvest in some of these projects and some of these nonprofits throughout the community. But right now, I just don't see it being an option when we're facing such an uphill battle. That's where I'm sitting.
Thanks, Jim. So
And
you're
maybe
focused.
that's a little extreme. So I do apologize for that. And maybe I'm looking at it from a very extreme side, but I can tell you that if it's your personal life or it's your business and you got to cut things, we got to make those tough decisions. So.
Yeah, thanks for sharing yeah. And I think, so what I hear you saying is really focusing on a balanced budget.
100%.
Thanks.
Ron, if you want to go.
Jim, I'm gonna have to agree with you. I'll vote for nothing but a balanced budget. We've got to get this spending under control.
We're picking and choose certain things on here. That'll get even trickier. And again, it'll be unjust, I think.
And I still, after 4 years, really believe that we can be creative on some of these. And I would still want to be creative on some of these tough decisions. But we can't beat ourselves up for making those tough decisions. And I guess that's what I want to tell everybody on the board. And I'm sorry that I'm not sitting there with you. But we can't beat ourselves up for not being able to fund this project or not being able to fund that project. Market fluctuations are out of our hands. They're beyond us, and we have to do what we need to do and what is best for our community and what is best for our town.
Yeah, maybe this is maybe like the unspoken thing that I'm just maybe not understanding. So if I'm hearing like we need to find that 200,000, but some of these like other projects around, fireworks and summer sounds, if we don't approve those don't happen, is what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Oh.
Right? Yeah, my question,
Those entities would have to make that decision on their own. They would
Right.
not be getting that contribution from the town.
they would need to figure out where to find that funding.
Yep, correct.
And because some of these bring people who bring in the fees and, the taxes that we need to run the town. So I'm almost like, what if we cut these and then we see a decrease in that revenue? And I don't know how to square the circle there. I guess I'm like, almost want to dig into, like, can we dig into like the day, like around 4th of July? For a year that didn't have fireworks, for a year that did, and like,
We have a graph. I can regurgitate that graph.
no, that would be really helpful, because that is like, I hear it, and I mean, maybe summer sounds is different than fireworks, because like, you can figure out a revenue source for summer sounds over fireworks, like how do you charge for fireworks? I don't know. But like that, what if we take a hit then in our revenue, and then we're in the same place again? And maybe Jim, you have more perspective on this, being here longer, just, that's my question, is what I'm trying to say.
No, I think that is a brilliant question, and I am with you 100%. How do you quantify these different events, and how do you justify what money and expenditures we put into these events as a town and as a community? And I would love to say yes to everything, and I think saying yes to everything has been a part of the problem that has gotten us here. I want to invest in the farmers markets. I want to invest in the summer sounds. I want to do ski touring, fireworks. Think about it. All the above. All the above. And how do you get a true perspective and a true knowing of what some of these events bring in is try not doing it for a year and see what happens. I'm not saying that that's right, and I'm not saying that that's wrong. But what I'm saying is I agree with your question and with your statement. And I think it would be, personally, I love these events, but doing our highest sense of right for the community, for the town, and really getting back to the basics of what local municipal government is supposed to be doing and being responsible, that to me takes precedent over a lot of the other stuff that I would like to say yes to. That's just me.
That's helpful, Jim. Thanks. So we've talked a lot about this every year that I've been on the board, because it has been this year when we've been allocating more money to nonprofits and partners and events. And for some of these things, it's hard to quantify. I think ski touring is a great example, because you really can like look at February, and it's kind of a keystone event. Like, people are coming here for that event. What we found with 4th of July, when we looked at the numbers, is that it was very noisy on whether actually having a fireworks show in particular, as opposed to just the event of 4th of July, right? It's a week that people like to be here, or a weekend, or a day. And so it's very tricky to tease out the actual revenue from that. And I think the same could be said with Summer Sounds. I mean, I think they've seen increased attendees, and they could document, we get a presentation from Lisa, and they can document like people coming from different regional towns as well. And hopefully they're spending money here, but we don't have actual like data to show that. And I think we have to have all these values conversation. That's what it really gets down to, and why it's tricky and uncomfortable, and it's hard to say no, and it's hard to say yes. For me, what kind of stands out, and again, we still have to get back to this $200,000. We kind of want to fixate on all these things that got cut out that we really like.
Those are already out.
Those are already
Those are
out.
already-
I'm sorry, the reason you brought it up is because like we have a budget based on
Yes.
the revenue that we expect from these events that happen.
Exactly.
So it's not totally irrelevant to the conversation.
It's not at all.
I asked.
It's not at all. And I would say, like, for example, the line item on housing authority. We have put a lot of grant match and effort and staff time into, and this board's time into building up a housing authority. And so to all of a sudden defund it, or to not see it be sustainable, to me, that would be a huge loss in capacity when we have built up so much momentum for really big projects. Or for example, I mean, again, we're kind of picking on things, but I think of like the Baker's Park project, where we have put in just a little bit of money every year to show that there's like town and county support for building like a really big asset in town that could have revenue impacts. So I think it's kind of like we've always struggled with these particular entities to sort of quantify their value to town. I mean, Summer Sounds, we're gonna see in the survey that like of all the things people love in town, they love Summer Sounds, right? They might be dissatisfied with other services, but they love Summer Sounds. And are we shooting ourselves in the foot with kind of our political capital to unfund some of these things that, again, to Jim's point, I totally hear you, are feel-good projects. Again, we build a lot of goodwill with the fire department by having this great partnership. And I would say the product that we get from our fire department is like so beyond what we would typically get for that amount that it's like an incredibly good value. And we also have to have the conversation of like, well, can we afford that level of service and product? And so what's really tricky in all these things is these are the things that we like. It's not so sexy to fund water and sewer and staff, even though we don't need that kind of stuff to operate. So I still think it's worth having the conversation. Or let me ask you, Gloria, do you see a world in which there are some options to get us closer to that $200,000 discrepancy lowering? So you have the Kendall debt, like, can you just kind of brainstorm a couple ideas that might get us closer?
Yeah, we've discussed reducing the Kendall deck project. And I actually noticed in there that I still had the Grodome Park in there, so taking that, it was 8,000, but still. And then I need to add in revenue for fire inspections and revenue for potentially the lift chair or the chairlift idea, so.
Is that potential? Do we know what it might be for the lift?
29,000,
How much?
29,000.
To sponsor chairs?
Thousand
$1,000
piece.
a year. Yeah. That's happened in the past, correct?
They're all labeled right now, but some of the businesses are no longer here, but it could be.
So we're talking about 50,000 Kendall deck decrease, 20,000 Kendall lift sponsorship, fire inspection revenue.
That's still to be determined. We're still working on that one.
Fire inspector, right?
Lift ticket increase.
Yeah, but we have one budgeted already for 20,000. So if we could get 20,000 in revenue for that.
And it's just budget neutral.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be hard to expect we'd get that level.
We don't think we get that revenue from fire inspections, is what you're saying?
20,000. No.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm thinking maybe like
50%.
okay. 10.
And what,
I have to
like
see what other.
100, right? Yeah. Can we get up on the whiteboard? Like,
One revenue source I wanted to put out there, this is kind of more of a policy question for the board, is I know there's some ski towns that are proposing at the state level, this vacancy tax. And so it's, I think, coming for the state legislature on whether they would sign on to that. So one, if we thought we liked that, that to me could be a potential source of revenue for the housing authority. We as a board, obviously, we don't have a lot of control, but we could write a letter of support saying we support that at the state level.
That would be a good idea from what I've read.
So
I mean, we could, if we join CAS too, then we'd have more say in how that shakes out.
Yeah. So is there a cost to joining?
Yes.
So, yeah.
How much is it?
A little bit of a cost or a lot of a cost?
I would have to go back. I know we decided 3 years ago that it wasn't, like, we weren't getting anything out of it at the time. But we could look at that again.
Yeah. Well, at the very least, if this board was in support of that policy promotion and advocacy, we could pursue that. It's no guarantee, but it could be a source of revenue.
And we'd be allowed to talk to our like legislators, right? Okay.
So that was one idea.
Would you like me to draft one?
I think it's worth looking into.
Well, are we supporting it? Are we gonna support it?
There's thumbs up. I haven't heard any dissension. Is anybody opposed to this board supporting it at the state level?
No.
No, okay.
Yeah, I'll look into that.
I love the bill, but it's good enough.
Do you ever love everything?
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
How everything
Yeah.
shakes out.
Mhm.
That's kind of why I'm like, you know.
Right.
So I think a question to answer, I've heard Ron say he's really in support of a balanced budget. Jim has echoed that as well. There is an option where we can kind of gradually move to that, right? Like you can do it all in 1 year, you can do it in a couple years. We have taken relatively drastic measures to significantly increase the admin fee. That's kind of a whiplash effect. Or decrease the admin fee. So there's options that we can do this over time and see how that works, but I do think we've gotten the message from staff, from our accountant, that we need to move towards a world in which our budgets are balanced.
And my perspective is that it's very important for us to have a balanced budget. I think that's a crucial goal for us. But I do fear that really drastic austerity measures do risk losing a lot of the steam, you know, in terms of you said it really well. It's like this momentum that has been building around some projects. And I think, I don't want to overuse this word, but I would support a balanced approach to balancing the budget. Yeah.
Which
And
would,
I think that means we have to be very clear, or I would support a position where we're very clear that we must balance the budget. But there doesn't need to be a must around 2025. That's my position.
So like gradually cutting these,
I mean, gradually over 2 or 3 years, like that's still pretty quick, right? But to the point where we're not dangerously depleting our end fund balance, or, you know, getting to the point where we are potentially in a crisis situation. Like, I don't even want to smell a crisis situation like with the budget, but the red lights are flashing. Like, we're seeing the signs that this isn't something that we can, you know, we can't wish away this problem.
We also,
Fortunately.
we don't know too, if federal funding will keep coming our
Right.
way for projects. So like that scares me more than anything of what happens if we start to lose some real momentum from federal grants and resources. I think one of the challenges that this community has is like, we're not a wealthy community. A lot of these rural mountain towns like have private donors and foundations and whatever to come in and support these community building programs. And like, yeah, we have some people in town who have a fair amount of money, but like not like any of the other ski towns. And so it's challenging when you look at these. Of my normal instinct, be like, okay, like let's go fundraise the money through a nonprofit. But like that's gonna be really challenging here. So we're like, that's why I'm like, we're losing a service basically. And it's not possible to like necessarily generate the revenue in other places.
I think that's where it comes in to be a little bit tricky, because I see these nonprofits really adding capacity to our community. I mean, I was just doing a little reflecting on our neighbor, Uray, because I hear people say to me, well, like, look at Uray's beautiful flowers and all the stuff they have and their amenities. And I said, okay, Uray has 1,000 people. So already there, you're just having generally more revenue than we have. They have so much more staffing to provide the level of service. So it's like we're kind of in this crux as a community where we all want better services, more amenities, more things. All those things have gotten more expensive over time, and we're still just 600 little people. You know, I mean, Uray has a Parks and Rec director, a facilities manager, a Parks Activities coordinator, a communication and community engagement coordinator, and a hot springs manager.
Making Sarah jealous.
I know. I'm just saying, like, they have, we also have a town administrator that has served as planning director, financial administrator, HR, sometimes IT. And like Uray has director levels for all of those things. And so when when our community calls and they're upset about the level of service, we also have to recognize what we're providing and how well we're doing for the community we are. And so we kind of have this balance of setting expectations for who we are, dreaming for the future of who we could be. And we're in this crux of like, we know where we want to go. We know what we want to be when we grow up, and we don't have all the money to do it.
Right. Yeah, for a point of context, I just pulled up Uray's 2024 budget, adopted budget, and they're spending about $5.1 million. That puts them $850,000 over their revenues.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, it's double-ish.
Orders of magnitude,
Right.
yeah. And it's like our facilities and parks people are staffing Kendall. I mean, obviously Kendall doesn't have the same number of visitors as the hot springs do, but just for reference point, like what we're dealing with here, when we just look at a neighbor that's very similar, but really is like double what we have. So I think it's like setting expectations. My latest thought was we just need to find the hot spring. That's what we need. I mean, it generates $2.2 million in revenue. Just find the hot spring and we'll be great. Okay, so Gloria, I kind of feel like I want us to move to some sort of direction. What I'm kind of hearing from the board is that we want a balanced budget. There's debates around the time frame of that. Is that fair to summarize?
Yeah.
So how does that help you?
I want a balanced budget too. I'm glad we can all agree on that. As far as the debate on the timeline of that, I mean, that's kind of why I'm coming to you all. If we have a solid plan for 26, 27, if it is spending down, I want a solid plan to move forward with. But taking from tonight is looking at, that those potential increases in revenues, potential more cuts that we can do. I guess my question would be, since we all agree that we do want a balanced budget, is there anything else in the budget that you see could be cut in the general fund?
That's kind of what I'm curious about, like to frame this conversation. And I know this is a big ask, but if we were saying like, we all agree that we need to balance the budget. It's not just that we should, but we need to. And some of us are thinking that should happen in this new budget for 2025. Like, what does that actually look like in terms of level of services? And I know there will always be question marks, but I don't feel that I have a good enough picture around exactly what $200,000 more being removed from this would look like. I mean, we just talked about $100,000 we could maybe see, coming out of there, but that still leaves a six-figure gap. So I'd be curious to see, what does that look like? Because maybe it's fine, maybe it's terrible, and I'm somewhere in between fine and terrible, so.
I mean, would you like me to make some assumptions to present at the next one on what else could be cut? Rather than you guys kind of going through it? But I'm just asking for that direction because I don't want to put out assumptions if you guys don't want me to.
I mean, I think we have to be clear that we're like operating you can never forecast the future really. Even though people charge you a lot to say that they can. But I think that we need some sort of baseline to have the conversation from. That's my feeling. And this is a great baseline. Like, this is a good looking budget. Unfortunately, it's more than we can afford, from the perspective of balance next year.
Yeah, and one thing I did do is take out a lot of our contracted services, but not all of them. So we still do have the visitor center and the chamber contract in there. We did increase 10,000 in our legal services in anticipation of a planning director. Now, this year, to date, we've only spent, I think up to August, we've only spent about 25,000, or is it now 29 for Clayton? I mean, for our attorney.
I'd have to look at it.
Yeah. So he's definitely not as expensive as previous attorneys and we might be able to save some there. But I don't want to limit us in case something were to come up. I did reduce our grant expenditures quite a bit on both sides, just because I didn't want that to inflate the budget at all, to make us think that we had more money than we did. And then looking at what we did was we added in a lot of refuse in here too. But I think that needs to happen. Those kind of things.
Honest.
Those kind of things like the administration fee, adding the refuse, like that kind of stuff is like more the right thing to do, to start balancing these accounts. So.
We have a really thoughtful, mindful board that's like, I think, we can't keep kicking the can on these things. Like, yeah.
I would be interested in, maybe exploring the item of shared services or having a conversation with the county. I really appreciated our joint work session. I think that was really helpful. I think, thinking about emergency services sales tax, right? That's collected at the county level, it's managed at the county level. That makes a lot of sense. I also think it's worth kind of looking at historically our expenses that the town has paid for emergency services, including sheriff, fire, and ambulance. And just see, like, we've heard from each of those departments. I've heard every year that I've been on the board that like their call volume is increasing, their expenses are increasing. And so again, as that cost share that we have to pay goes up, and we're also seeing an increase in the revenue at the county level of that tax, are there options that we could have conversations there? But I also recognize that already the county's picking up the very large tab of the ambulance service. So I think maybe Gloria, you and I could have a conversation with Willie and Austin and just kind of talk about how that all works, because we're so small. Again, comparing to Uray, it's like, well, you have Uray County who has thousands of people. And so I think just having good conversations about that, because we all have the same goals of like providing good service, providing good coverage. We all live in this town. So maybe having some conversations around our shared services budget. But again, I also know there's things that the county covers that then we don't have to. So
Uray County's budget is 20 million.
right.
Yeah.
In the world, yeah.
I mean, to refuse as well, like thinking about how do we navigate having our visitors help support this community? Because I think Austin made the point in our joint meeting where he's like, we're basically a national park that has like no services.
Right.
So like, as we're thinking about cutting, other ways we can think about
Revenue.
like adding to gain revenue.
Right. And Ron mentioned that earlier, like the garbage being generated on federal lands but we're paying the bill. Like that's one example of that.
I mean, pay for the road maintenance.
Right.
Like,
I mean, I had this conversation with visitors and family this summer. I said, look, there's 600 of us ratepayers. I mean, maybe there's 700 people, but we looked at our rate numbers, right? And and in the county, it's our road and bridge crew that is managing those public lands that you get to access, and their eyeballs got really big. And I know they receive some funding from the feds for it, but it's like $100,000. It's not very much. And all of my visitors and friends and family that came there, like, we would pay a fee, we'd pay a toll, we'd pay a user fee, we'd pay for your trash. Like, they got it. They got this idea of there's 600 of us hosting 1 million people or more. And I think that resonates with people. Now, what our legal options are is the other piece, but it's just simply the fact that we're a tiny little community that hosts a lot of people. And that comes with baseline costs that whether we were 1,000 people, it would cost this much, or whether we're 600 people.
I think this occupancy tax is interesting because there's like 60% of our homes are on our second homes. And that's adds additional people, adds additional revenue sources, more money in our local economy. It's just like, not only is that a revenue generating sources, I think that incentivizes people actually living in the homes that are here.
Well, and you have to pay for that infrastructure, whether you're here or not, because you expect the water to turn on when you show up and you expect the toilet to flush when you come. Gloria, are there other revenue options that we haven't talked about here? Other fees? I mean, even, I'm gonna just throw it out there because we're talking crazy. Like, are there tax options that we can put to the voters? Are there other options? Again, sales tax is so high, but are there other ways that we're not thinking of that help the users of our stuff share the cost of that stuff? Yeah, Ron and then Jim.
We've got an easy one. Behind the depot, all types of construction waste goes back there. Eventually, the town's gonna have to clean that up. So if people that aren't town affiliated dump back there, we need to charge a fee for that. Because we're going to be the people that clean it up later.
Mhm.
We're gonna be taking the dump trucks, we're gonna be moving to wherever. It's just, again, it's a small number, but it's a little number.
So would you have an attendance? Would we have cameras,
Same way we're doing with running the trucks through town that are over, with the weight limit.
like impact fee?
You're gonna have to
Mhm,
have some honesty involved because we can't afford to have somebody stand down there all day. We
mhm,
can't afford to have somebody at the dump all day.
mhm,
It's gonna have to be somewhat on your honor.
mhm.
But those, like I said, there's not much money, but it's a little bit. And when it's time to clean this up, it's gonna cost thousands of dollars to do that.
Our own little mini super fund.
Jim, you had your hand up.
Yeah, it was about something totally different. Unfortunately, Ron, I think the majority of the crud you're referencing is on private property. So that'll be interesting to see.
Would that be your property?
Well, I'm just saying it's private property. Last session, last November, December, we raised the bed tax, what, $2? I'm asking the question because I don't have my notes in front of me.
I think it was 2 or 4.
It was either 2 or 4. Yeah.
It was 4.
It was 4.
Yeah, let me just double check.
And that helped. Sorry, people staring at me. Wondering what I'm doing. What if we proposed a half penny to a penny additional sales tax that goes straight to some of these urgent areas that we need to focus on? Is that something that anyone would be open to having a conversation about?
How would that work? Would we actually get that, or would we only still get half?
Well, no, that's really up to us. If we implement a penny sales tax or a half penny sales tax, it would be an increase in the sales tax, but we could earmark it and make it go and make that money work for us and point it in the direction we want it to go. I'm just trying to think outside the box.
Yeah.
Because you're right. We are 650 people, 700 people, and we're essentially throwing a party for 2 million guests annually. And now we have to pay for the party favors. So how do we do that?
Yeah, it's like what that point of action, and the sales tax is one kind of easy, blunt one. The one question I have with the sales tax, and I'd be curious what our Colorado tourism data starts to show, is that we already have pretty high sales tax, and so do we start to price ourselves out? We're seeing, Jim, you and I were at the chamber meeting talking about this.
Oh, absolutely.
And there's also an increase in remote, right? How many people are ordering online, and now the sales tax for your stuff online is even more expensive. But it is a point of sale, point of capture. Gloria, are there other fees? I mean, we could raise the bed tax again. Like, I just kind of think it could be helpful to say, well, we could do this thing, we could do sales tax, we could do bed tax, we could do bed fee. There's proposals of the vacancy tax. Like, what are the options on the table? There's parking meters. What are the municipal options on the table for us?
And I've put all the options that I can in this budget. The sales tax option would definitely be a policy decision on your end. I know you want me to come up with a pot of money for you.
I know there's no pot of money.
I don't have that pot of money.
Put a lot of rainbows for some.
Yeah. A unicorn. I mean, this is the extent of my knowledge of what we can do with our budget.
Mhm.
I know you want me to have more, and I can try more.
Well, but
I've been going over this, like, I didn't want to present you with a $200,000 deficit budget. I didn't want to do that.
But that's where we're at.
Right.
that's where we are. Yeah.
Right.
That's where we are. And I wanted to give you guys tons of revenue options. And we've been slowly doing that. We've been, the lodging fee is a good example, EQRs on our refuse. You guys will be presented with a new fee schedule for our facilities, and we plan on doing that for each department. Doing a fee schedule for each department to present to you guys through December so that we have kind of increases in those fees moving forward. Some of the more complicated ones, will take me time. We've done the increase in marijuana sales tax, which will be implemented next year. Not a huge increase, but something that will help us. see, what else have we done? I mean, we've increased as much as we can increase, to my knowledge. Now, if there's something out there that I don't know of, like, I hope someone brings it to my attention, but this is where we're at.
Yeah, sales tax could be on the table. Jim, you had your hand up.
Hey, thank you. We did not recognize the full benefit of the new adjusted bed tax, but we will in 2025, correct?
No, we will recognize it this year.
Well, I was told earlier in the year, or maybe it was
But
implied.
it's not included in this budget.
There's a
This is why I need your brains.
Should I start honking the horn
How
now?
much do we think
Yes.
it's gonna be?
Not a ton, but it'll get it just
little
goes
bit.
to our water and
A little
sewer
bit.
fund.
goes to water and sewer,
Yeah.
but it is okay because we are managing all these things in tandem. I mean, yes, our general fund is just feeling a little bit frustrating, but it's those water and sewer funds are super important. We're gonna be dealing with them for the next 10 years. So I think those are really important. I guess the thing that comes to my mind is, I've been on trips, wrong road trips, and we're staying at some motel in some random tiny community, and they have like 10 fees listed for community health district and fire district and like road, they have all these various districts that are levying additional taxes for revenue. Because again, they're basically like asking the visitors to share that cost. Again, I don't know what the options are and what would be palatable to our voters. But I just think it is really important to kind of keep contemplating this idea that there's 600 of us hosting over 1 million or whatever the number is going to be. And I think increasing our fees is really helpful. Maybe we continue to do that, MOAS. I don't know, parking meters might be something. If we could exempt locals and they use their dump tag.
But people just go over to side streets. You're just gonna crowd side.
And somebody has to monitor it.
Yeah.
We would have to have signage in the
Mhm.
side streets that says
Yeah.
you can be here for 2 hours max.
Yeah.
That's right. And they got to enforce it. Yeah.
Have to have a staff, exactly. So, I mean, there's things we can throw out there, but, yeah.
I mean, would parking meters actually generate enough revenue? I know there's like the Chicago example, but like. are they
Not
actually-
Chicago.
Well, like.
Right. Yeah, doesn't some Middle Eastern king own all?
Yeah, some like,
That's the profit.
yeah, some private equity, like.
I think it might be
firm.
the Emirati state.
They own all the.
Meters in Chicago?
Yes,
Yeah, do you not?
for 60 more years.
Yeah, during the recession, they bought all the parking meters from the city and now they operate them and it's like a whole
Right.
mess. Yeah.
It's a bad deal. So we need to not make any bad.
Yes.
Yeah, no bad deals. No partnering with any foreign actors, Gloria. That's the direction you're.
We're foreign at the time, but then it was like bought,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No shell companies.
Carl knows, yeah.
All right, well, it sounds like where we're getting is that we'd like to, we all know we need to move to a balanced budget. We would love for you to share some options about what that could look like in the near term and over time. Is that what I'm hearing?
Mhm.
And again, we might be in a better position because of our actuals in November. And so that just helps us be in a better position. And it might mean like, oh, it supplements and we still want to move towards a balanced budget where our revenues and expenditures align. I think one thing I would propose out just to see, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, Amy, how to.
Yeah.
But so we need to let the fire department know by tomorrow, though, definitely if we're funding the fireworks. Is that correct?
That's what I've been told.
Okay.
By October 1st.
I think though, we also could have other entities on here that would say we need to.
We do.
For nonprofits that would
Right.
say like, we need
Right.
to know, we can't wait till November.
It's not like,
I mean, Single Track Society needs to know sooner rather than later. So does Creative District.
Yeah.
I think everyone has a budget or has a timeline.
Budget season for everyone.
I just think we're in a position where like, we can't allocate our funds to these things yet.
And we don't.
And I would love to see some of those other things come back onto the budget,
Yeah.
like, we think about it from this equity standpoint, like the people that have the least disposable income are those that benefit the most from these, and it builds community where everybody comes together, but we also have to be solvent. We have to, provide core services at all costs, and, we can't cut into that with these other things that are not core services.
Yeah, I came up with my own priority list of these extra things and I got it down to 53,000. So maybe we can rank them and get to a possible number of what we could do.
I'm still in a, like, more enforcement means more ability to like collect revenue from
Absolutely.
our code. That's,
Yeah, a lot of our tickets are $25.
yeah, I mean, that's not,
No.
yeah, it's not crazy.
We do have, up to 300 on some of them, but a lot of the ones that have been written are 25 from the sheriff's department.
We're not enforcing a lot. We're not enforcing everything because we can't, right?
There's not the capacity to enforce everything all the time and.
And I think unless we're talking about sales tax or a bed fee or something, these other revenue options require enforcement.
Right.
Which are
And
challenging.
I personally, I kind of philosophically disagree with like code as a way to generate revenue. I think that, code should be about building a place we want to live, but
I think it's more,
if it gets us some revenue, then.
could it offset some of these
Right.
like additional costs,
Right.
Well, we hear from the community, we would like the community to look differently with some of our code. You have the codes on the books, we would like it to, I hear that a lot of like.
I mean, we're about to have their meeting on
Yeah.
Thursday, and I'm
Right.
sure the topic of conversation is gonna be, how do you enforce whatever, it's-
Yeah.
I mean, that's the most important thing about passing a policy is how it's enforced.
Lori, does that give you enough kind of muddy direction to work with?
Yes? Yes, it does.
Clear as
Yeah.
cement.
So basically, I'm going to come back to you all on the 14th during our first budget hearing with a proposed balanced budget that would be next year and a proposed gradually decreased balanced budget over the next several years.
With potentially exploring some of these things like reducing Kendall deck. We love the sponsor a lift idea, all those kinds of things.
And then, yeah, I'm definitely going to be adding in some of these revenue ideas and the lodging fee to the water and sewer.
And is there an option in all this that we wean ourselves off of the administrative fee differently?
Right.
Like if the lodging fee is supplementing that for a little bit, do we gradually change the admin fee as opposed to kind of dramatically that we did this year? Although in the finance committee, we talked about how we weren't even doing as much as the finance committee recommended, so. Okay, and it sounds like right now we're not making any commitments to any of these things that are not on the list. Is the board in agreement with that we're not making any commitments of anything to add back in? Right now?
That's
Unfortunately.
my understanding.
Yep, okay. Does that feel clear?
Yeah, it is going to be a little strange presenting two budgets to you all on. Because I'm going to have to notice them both, so I'm going to have to finish them. Both before then, probably in the next week. If I could be directed with one budget, that would make my life a lot easier. And is
there any reason to have another short work session?
Well, we don't have the information, we just do this again, right?
Well. You tell, I don't know.
I mean, we do have 3 weeks between meetings right now. If you all wanted to do well, I have to notice it. Let's see.
But could we have a work session on another draft, on these two draft budgets that's not noted? I mean, the meeting's noticed.
Yeah, it's gonna be a push just to get those two.
By the 15th.
Before the 14th. Actually, I'd have to get them done before.
By the 10th, yeah.
So that's just gonna be a push.
So it sounds like you're asking us for a decision on whether we want a balanced budget or a gradually balanced budget.
I think I need one budget to do
Okay.
rather than two. I can give you options in that one, but I think I can only handle
Mhm.
the budget.
Well, I would like to see a budget that balances by 2027. I think that's what I would ask for individually. I'm not sure how we feel broadly.
I think Carl made a good argument for over time. I think like austerity measures tend to leave a community without many resources. And it sounds like we've done a lot to cut a lot and think about revenue a lot. So I would lean towards a over time balanced budget anyway. So that's right.
I agree with that.
Jim, you had your hand up. Did you want to add something to the timing and conversation?
Yeah, it was about the presentation of the budget. My suggestion would be present the board with the bare bones, what it would look like. And this board will vote on the absolute bare bone budget. And depending how revenues look over the next couple of months, maybe we can add some stuff back in. But I think we need to be honest and responsible. And over time is really, really nice. But if we were looking at this in our own pocketbooks, we would have done this months ago and cut stuff. I still truly believe we need to get back to basics and be responsible as a governing body. That's just me.
I think that's fair, Jim. I would also argue that there's like critical community investments to carry forward, right? Like, again, in thinking about a household budget is different than a municipal budget because we have kind of longer term things and relationships and events and projects that we've built up. And even just simply the fact that we're potentially not including any grant match, like that's a drastic change. Like we already have pretty drastic changes. And if we were able to weather those over time, considering that our fund balance is still not terrible, like we are not in a dire situation in terms of like what we actually have to work with.
Right, I think the analog of like a household budget would be, maybe just to do round numbers, let's say you earn $50,000 in a year. And that year you went to the hospital twice, you bought a new car and you spent $80,000, but you have a cash reserve. Like that's not a sustainable situation. You need to address that, but it doesn't mean that you don't spend those dollars because you have to that year.
You just address it over time.
Right, and we do have it's not what we'd like to have over the long term. We don't want to see this continue to decrease, but we are still, we're not at $0.
Well, and if you look at what Gloria's done to the budget, the first graph, we have decreased our budget significantly. Our expenditures last year were 4.1 and we're projecting to get them to 3.4. That's like a pretty significant decrease already. And that impact alone will be felt by our community because it's changes in what we're funding with grants and services and events and staff. We're talking about decreasing staffing to a department that already is overloaded with requests and demand for services. So we're trying to thread the needle here really carefully. Go ahead.
Well, sorry to kind of monopolize things a little bit here. I do think that seeing that bare bones budget could also be a useful starting point. Like if we need to direct Gloria in a way that's gonna, provide us the nucleus for that conversation where we actually make the decision, I do think that could also be a useful place to start. I think that I would like to see one or the other. I guess in terms of like staff direction, I don't feel I think that would also be helpful for us to see, like, what does it look like to balance the budget next year? And I think that might make this conversation a little more specific and get us out of the philosophical arena, which we need to be in right now, but we're going to have to get out of it pretty quickly.
Are there
Well-
options where the November actuals, I mean, you and I have talked about this a bit, is like, we can present the bare bones budget, but the November actuals can help us get to the fund balance that we'd like to see. And or we can have a conversation around the November actuals. If our revenues are greater than we anticipated, then that gives us a little leeway to weather this over time. How do you feel about an approach where you present the bare bones budget, where you found the cuts, or increases in revenue, and we revisit this again with the November actuals, kind of like what we've done in previous budget seasons?
I think process wise, that makes more sense.
Mhm.
So that you guys can see what the implications are this
Mhm.
next year and then get creative.
Mhm. And then we have that philosophical discussion of like, okay, our revenues were better than we anticipated. We have our projections for our actuals. Are we going to use those revenues to continue to cut, or are we going to add a few things back in because we think we want to do this over time, and we can have that conversation then when we have the November actuals?
Mhm.
What does the board think? So that direction is bare bones budget, present it balanced.
Great.
Yes,
Yeah,
Connie?
we're to figure out what we're actually losing.
Yeah.
Contextualize that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good job, gang. We have 4 minutes. Am I allowed to adjourn this meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, it is 6:56. We're gonna adjourn and we're gonna reconvene at like 7:05 for the Board of Trustees meeting. Thank you. Thanks, Jim. All right, for those who want, they can do the Pledge of Allegiance now. Pledge of allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. All right, the time is 7:06. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees on September 23rd. And I call this meeting to order. Roll call, please, Melina.
Trustee Hubbardson.
Here.
Trustee Gardner.
Here.
Snicker.
Here.
Trustee Wakefield.
Here.
George.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Harper.
Here.
Mayor Cranker.
Here. Thank you. All right, we're running a little bit late. We just finished a work session on the budget from 5 to 7. So if you have questions about that, feel free to tune in. All right, do we have any staff or board revisions to the agenda?
Staff does not have any revisions,
Board?
other than the work session was at 5 o'clock.
All right. All right, well, now I'm open it up to public comment. We'll take in-person public comment first. You'll have 3 minutes. If you have public comment related to a specific agenda item, please wait for that. If you're here to speak, if you have public comment related to the public hearing that is about a land use application, please save your public comment about the land use application till the public hearing portion. If you have a general public comment, we'd love to hear it. So we'll open it up to in-person public comment and then we'll go to Zoom. We have any in-person public comment? All right, we'll go to Zoom. You can click the raise hand button and we'll promote you to panelist. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please introduce yourself.
Can you hear me?
We can.
You guys have had a really fun couple of hours. I just want to tell you that. If you're going to redo this cemetery survey, get to Kenny Schaaf. Kenny Schaaf did the last one. He will still have the most data and it'll be easy for him to update from there. And Kenny does an amazing amount of work for a lot of people at a lower price and he kind of favors Silverton. So that would be probably a really useful person to try. San Juan County and Silverton are not unique in that a small amount of people have to pay for services that might come from the federal lands. Look at Lake City and Hinsdale. They've got more federal land than we do per capita. But so I'm not sure whining about that, whether that's really effective or not. The other thing I want to say about moving the extension of fixing the budget to other years, extending it out. We don't know what crises we're going to face in those years. We haven't seen that yet, and something always goes wrong. When it comes to events, I have always said, if we're doing events to entertain ourselves, cut it out. If the town's, I mean the town's paying for it. If the town is paying for an event that brings in a lot of people and brings in a lot of taxes, then you have that to consider because you could lose a lot of revenue. But do keep in mind, if you can, which events bring the most people. 33 years I worked at the sheriff's office, and I will tell you how we managed bad budget years. It used to be pretty much a 50-50 budget. And when the town or the county had a bad year for money, then the other one would pick up a little more to help out that year. And it was very peaceful, very often, not very often we did it, but we did do that where, like say this year, the county might offer you a little more money with your shared services to keep everything going at a higher value, which could probably help you if they're going to play nice. I mean, I remember years at the sheriff's office when we just didn't spend money if we didn't have to. We tried to cut down on the amount of gasoline, that kind of stuff. So it can be something that can be worked out if the county's receptive to it. Although I still believe firmly we need to know what money is going into the emergency services fund and whether you're getting money out of that to pay your share or if that's just racking up at the county. And I'm so glad I'm not sitting in your chairs making these decisions, but thank you. Have a great evening.
Thanks. That was 3 minutes exactly. Do we have anybody else on Zoom who would like to make a public comment? Okay, seeing no hands raised, we will close public comment. And we'll move on to presentations and proclamations, which we have none. And we'll move on to new business. So this will be a public hearing, and I'll kick it over to staff.
Awesome. We will have contracted planner Chris Masser do the staff presentation.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. The public hearing before you all tonight is for exterior building alterations on an existing structure located at 1104 Blair Street. The property is owned by Jesse Rowe and Zach Harris, and that is also the applicants. It is within the BP zoning district and within the A-Rod and Historic Overlay District. This meeting has been properly noticed, and a few public comments have been submitted, all of which have been in support of this application, and those are included in tonight's packet. The subject site is located on a 5,000 square foot lot, and it currently contains a 2-story multifamily residential structure. This application is for modifications to a previously approved plan to include the use of corrugated metal siding instead of the prior approved T111 siding, and modification to the size and location of some windows. No other changes are currently proposed based upon the prior approval. As mentioned before, approval was previously granted for the exterior alterations on this existing structure. However, the current Silverton Municipal Code does not allow staff to grant approval to any modifications to the prior approved plans, and thus the changes must be reviewed by the Historic Review Committee and the Board of Trustees to ensure compliance with the Silverton Municipal Code. Additionally, the proposal includes the replacement of the prior approved T111 siding with corrugated metal siding. And to ensure the proposed corrugated metal siding won't negatively impact the surrounding properties, staff does recommend the Board of Trustees add a site-specific condition regarding the corrugated metal siding being non-reflective. The Historic Review Committee did review this application earlier this month and recommended approval with the one condition that the corrugated metal siding be non-reflective, with exception to a rustable material that may initially be reflective but not over time. BHRC also discussed other potential concerns with the proposed exterior modifications, to include the future color of the corrugated metal siding and whether the exterior color would be considered modernization of the historic architectural style of the existing structure. While the HRC did discuss other concerns, specifically regarding painting the siding a color that would not fit within the context of the A-Rod or the historic overlay district, such as black, they elected to only recommend approval with the one condition regarding the non-reflective corrugated metal siding. Staff does recommend approval of the HRC application with the one condition that the corrugated metal siding be non-reflective, so that it does not significantly impact the surrounding properties. However, this is a decision for the Board of Trustees to make based upon the evidence and testimony it hears. And this slide includes sample motions, which are also included in tonight's packet. The applicants have also requested a fee waiver since approval was previously granted for the exterior alterations in July of 2022. And since the current municipal code does not allow administrative approval for minor modifications, a full and new application was required. Staff does recommend approval of the fee waiver since the applicants have already paid the planning review fee, and the this application is just for minor changes to the prior approval. This slide does contain sample motions for the fee waiver, and these are also included in tonight's meeting packet. And that is the end of this presentation. I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor, and allow the applicant to address the board.
Great, thanks, Chris. So now we'll hear from the applicant. You'll get a chance to present. And we'll then move to public comment, and then the trustees can ask questions, and then we'll move on to trustee deliberation. So go ahead, thanks.
Hi there. My name is Zach Harris. I'm a year-round Silverton resident who owns 1104 Blair Street jointly with my wife, Jessie Rowe. We purchased 1104 Blair Street a few years back when rentals in Silverton were scarce and largely unaffordable. Our idea was to clean up a decaying building and convert it into a multi-unit dwelling. It has been a long process with many unique twists and turns, and we are grateful for the help of town staff, specifically Bill McDougall, Lisa Adair, Lucy, Gloria, and Bevan. Thank you all. As noted in the packet, we do have an approved application for our remodeling project, and tonight's meeting is about some changes we are requesting to that already approved application. Because there is not a revision process for applications, we're here again before you. There are two main changes before you today. The first change is minor updates to the size and location of some windows and doors. The provided elevations reflect the new sizes and locations of the doors and windows. Basically, as we finish building the space, we realized some slightly different widths, heights, and locations for the doors and windows would be better for the interior floor plan and in some cases reduce project cost. These changes are hardly visible from the Heritage Tourism Corridor. The second change is regarding the exterior siding material of the house. When we purchased this 1978 building, much of it was clad in T111 siding, a wood composite material which I know many members of the community do not love. We initially elected to continue with the T111 siding to match the existing siding. However, in the years that have passed, we realized it would be better to do something different. Additionally, we have heard from our insurance company that metal is the best material for the insurability of the building long-term with the forest fire considerations that exist in neighboring areas. There are many examples of corrugated metal used successfully on Blair Street, including the building next door to us and multiple buildings across the street from us. We believe that corrugated metal fits well with the look and character of the overlay district. We were pleased to see from the staff report that staff believes that non-reflective metal is an appropriate material for the overlay district. It seems from the HRC hearing that there were no problems with these two changes of doors and windows and a change in the siding material. However, it was a total surprise that there was a discussion about the color of our building. In the interest of fairness, consistency, and applying the town code with accuracy, I do hope that the discussion of whether or not to suggest color stipulations of our building does not arise this evening. However, as this is my only forum to address such possible concerns, I will make the following arguments regarding color. One, that color is not within the purview of this or any other historic review process. Two, we already provided a color palette in our first application, which could be considered at this point already approved. Three, the color black is a historic color, even if it is making a modern comeback. And four, our building does not have a historic facade, which means that the one sentence from code that is being used to justify any discussion of color does not apply in our case. So number one, color has not been part of any other application process. I have not been able to find any evidence that color was ever part of a discussion of an application to the Historic Review Committee. With due respect, Trustee Harper speculated at our HRC hearing that color may have been part of the application process for the new bathrooms at Anisi Park. I have not been able to find any evidence that this was the case. If you review the HRC discussion recently with Clarion about the future of our town's land use code, the committee members explicitly state that they never comment on color, nor would they feel it appropriate in the LUC to rewrite to allow them to do so. As a reminder, right now in the historic district, you can paint your building whatever color you choose without any type of approval at any time. This is one of the reasons we have consistently heard from the HRC that they specifically choose not to discuss color in any of their other public hearings. To impose a color stipulation in this case would be highly irregular and atypical. Number two, we already provided a color palette and we were told it was irrelevant. In our first set of approvals, we provided a color palette to the Planning Commission after consulting with History Colorado, Main Street Architecture, and our own historically minded architect. The Planning Commission said that they liked our color palette, but basically said that colors were not relevant for the approval. Additionally, staff advised us that colors were not relevant for this application. So of course, I was surprised when a conversation about color came up. If you find it relevant, and I hope you do not, our chosen color palette included black, charcoal gray, cream, and white. While I'm not sure what elements of this color palette would ultimately translate to the completed building, since many things have changed along the way, and we are learning to embrace uncertainty as a natural element of the remodeling process here in Silverton, I would argue that if you choose to believe that color is somehow part of the HRC purview, please note that we already have approved colors. However, at this moment, you can walk down the street and see that a lot of our building is already black or charcoal gray. Thus far, we have been proceeding under the originally approved or ignored color palette and have purchased and installed a number of materials with that color palette in mind. Asking us to restrict any colors from that color palette would represent a financial hardship and a change very late in our process. While I do not agree that, number three, black is a historic color and it just happens to be making a modern comeback. While I do not agree that color is within the purview of this application, I'd like to address the concerns raised by the HRC briefly, because we do care about concerns folks might have, and it is important to us to fit in well with our neighborhood. We value the history of our beautiful town, and we are concerned with creating something that adds to rather than detracts from our community. While it was implied that perhaps a black building would not look historic, it is important to note that black is a historic color, and an all-black building with white or cream trim is actually one of the most common historic color palettes. Our town is lucky to have a very complete set of archives at the San Juan Historical Society, which contain many images of monochromatic color palettes throughout the history of our beautiful town. Number four, our building is not historic, and therefore the code reference does not apply. During our HRC hearing, after town staff initially advised that color was not within the purview of the committee, they said on the fly that maybe an argument could be made based on the statement, visual aesthetic modernization of the historic architectural style / facade of existing structures in the AROD is not acceptable. As noted in the packet and as Chris clearly stated in his presentation, our building is not a historic building with a historic facade in need of preservation. So the concept of whether or not we are modernizing a historic building does not apply in this case. There is no historic facade. We are not talking about preserving a building that is historic in any way. Besides the recommendation of experts, my personal understanding of the code is that it is intended to preserve historic assets to the town so they are not completely modernized and therefore lose their historic character. For example, if someone wanted to come along and modernize the facade of the Grand Imperial Hotel, that would clearly not be allowed. But I do not read that sentence to mean any non-historic building may not have any element that may be construed as modern, such as a single color that a dissenting faction of the HRC do not like. So in summary, I hope that color is not a serious consideration or discussion point tonight, as it has not been for any other application to the HRC. We are so grateful for your time and for all of the public comments in support of our project. And I would like to leave you with an excerpt from one such comment that we feel summarizes our sentiment better than we are able to ourselves. Shane Furman, our prior mayor and chair pro tem of the Historic Review Committee said, and I quote, "During the Historic Review committee's discussion, there were suggestions to impose a specific paint requirements on Zach and Jesse's building. This proposal is an unprecedented and outside the scope of the committee's authority. In my experience as a member of the Historic Review Committee, there were several occasions where members attempted to make decisions beyond our jurisdiction, such as paint colors or building use. We explicitly agreed that paint colors should not fall under the committee's purview. As a committee member, I consistently ensured that we stayed within our authorized scope, and I hope that the current committee is able to maintain that discipline. In the interest of transparency and fairness, which are core goals of the town's master plan, I strongly urge the committee to remain within its defined authority and avoid any appearance of bias or inconsistency in this case. End quote. Thank you all for your time and your consideration. We greatly appreciate your public service, and although I believe as part of the public hearing process, I need to sit back down now, I'll do my best to answer any questions you might have of me. Thank you.
So we'll move now to public comment on this application, and then we are able to ask questions of the applicant and our staff. So do we have any public comment on this application? Do we have any in person? Doesn't look like it. Do we have any online? If you'd like to make a public comment, you can click the raise hand button and we'll promote you to panelist. All right, seeing none, I'll close public comment. Noted for the public and staff and trustees, we did receive a variety of public comments as part of this application, and they're in the packet. All right, Zach, if you want to come back on up, now is the time where the trustees are welcome to ask questions of staff or the applicant. And then we will close the public hearing portion and move on to trustee deliberation. So if you have any specific questions for the applicant, now would be the time.
What are the colors again? That you had selected?
That's in the previous application packet.
Okay, you told us tonight some colors.
Our color palette is black, charcoal, gray, cream, and white. That was our originally chosen color palette. Again, I would ask and reiterate that I don't understand why color is a subject of discussion tonight and no other night.
And just a notation that you guys are welcome to ask staff, but again, when it comes to this, like, it has been pretty clearly stated that color is not within like the realm of discussion for the HRC or Board of Trustees. I don't know if Lucy or Chris, you guys wanted to add anything there, or if trustees have any questions about that.
The code just states that you can add site-specific conditions, and lists a few examples. It says including but not limited to, and color is not one listed. But I don't think that that would stop you from having that. But it is, we have not considered color very often in the past.
Thanks. No questions from me. Any other questions for the applicant? I don't want to ignore Tyler and Jim. I know you guys are online. Thanks, Jim, for sitting in the dark. If either of you have questions for the applicant or staff, this would be a great time. And again, trustees are able to talk to staff after we close the public hearing process. But if you have questions for Zach in particular on this application, now would be your time. Okay, so speak now or forever hold your peace. Thanks, Zach. So we will, yeah, go ahead.
Lucy, could we lose the historic district designation if some of these colors were used?
That's a hard
Kind of an impossible
question to answer. I think that question would be better answered by someone from History Colorado.
Someone what?
Someone from History Colorado.
So I'm going to close the public hearing portion of it, and now I welcome trustee deliberation and conversation with staff.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the color itself is relevant, and even so, the ones they're using, like he said, black is historic. I like the idea of corrugated metal. I think it's safe. I think it's smart. And it looks like, you know, with all the discussions of the committee, even though there was discussions of color, ultimately they recommended to approve it with just the condition of non-reflective metal. So I agree with that. I think they did everything in the realm that they're supposed to do and correctly.
Amy? Jim, looks like you're off mute. Did you want to add something?
No, I wanted to add what Amy just said. With I was sitting in, having multiple years on the planning commission and one of the founders of the A-Rod, and understanding what it is we're trying to do in preserving Blair Street. Some questions did come up, 100%. Questions about color did come up, absolutely. In previous conversations with other individuals who were renovating homes on Blair Street, especially in that corridor between 11th and 13th, color was 100% discussed. The types of materials, 100% discussed. The Historic Review Committee did approve this. And yeah, if precedent is anything, that staff and the Historic Review Committee has approved this, then we should go ahead and approve it.
Thanks, Jim. Other trustee comments or questions?
Well, we get like, so it sounds like this comes up a little bit, color, not a lot, but a little. I actually was planning meeting 2 months ago. They required Silverton Mountain to paint a building a certain color. So it seems to come up, and that's not a historic district. So is there like gonna be clarity for the new code at all of whether or not a committee has review of color? Basically, this is gonna happen again.
Depends on who's on those committees, Lindsay. I think currently our current code and process does not talk about color. I mean, we have instances of black corrugated metal on Blair Street. I think, Jim, I appreciate your comments. I think the perspective that I have is that part of the reason for this kind of reformatted historic review committee was to make the process a bit more streamlined and clearer and less subjective. And so I think there have been instances of applications in the past where it was a bit unclear and less streamlined and more subjective. And so I see this process as moving away from that. And I think, to me personally, I would not support a lot of rulings around what color people can and can't paint their buildings. I mean, Old Arcade is bright orange. Where did we decide that was historic? It has black corrugated metal on it. You know, there's different examples all over. And so currently our historic review committee and our guidelines in the Department of the Interior were not specifically regulating around color. And I'm not sure that's where our community wants to go. I think the situation we have here is that it's not even a historic building. And so we happen to have a non-historic building on Blair Street, which just has existed for decades. And maybe that's the part that people don't love, that it's a non-historic building on Blair Street, but that's kind of where we are. And so I think it's super important to kind of preserve the pieces where we continue to have buildings on Blair Street that fit the form and character. And I think that this application has done that in what they've gone through the committee. I would encourage our historic review committee to shy away from color specifications. It's not currently in what we have said are the guidelines, but the planning commission is kind of legislating on or regulating around county and town projects. So
yes, I'm not advocating for one way or the other.
Yeah.
But just like this process seems to go pretty astray, is a word you could use. And so that seems like kind of a waste of resources and time for a variety of people involved. But I also, it seems from the presentation, it sounds like a lot of research has gone into trying to make this look as historic as possible for a building that was built in the 70s, late 70s.
Lindsay, are you asking the question around, is there anything more we need to do in the historic review committee process or guidelines on like whether we are gonna regulate around this or whether we aren't, or? Yeah, go ahead, Jim.
I don't think it's about regulating or not regulating. I really do appreciate Zach's presentation this evening. What the conversation really revolved around was the fact that this is a building that is surrounded by true historic look and feel and structures that are on historic Blair Street. Removing everything else, staff has recommended, historic review committee has recommended. I think we can have a more lengthy conversation, but I would recommend, I don't have the verbiage right in front of me, but I would recommend that we go ahead and vote on this.
Thanks, Jim. Other comments from
Absolutely.
trustees? This application. Yeah, Tyler.
Yeah, I think the real sort of reason we're here is for the change in the materials. And I think that the corrugated fits in like the applicant stated. A lot of buildings in the historic corridor have corrugated metal. And then, you know, I would have had, my biggest concern maybe would have been with windows and doors changing, but if the historic review committee has looked at it and suggest it for approval, then I also think that it's pretty easy for us to approve.
Thanks.
I agree completely.
All right, well, the motions are on page 34. Is this board interested in continuing with the condition that was recommended by staff in the historic review committee that the new materials of corrugated metal be anti-glare or non-reflective, with the option that it could be metal that would rust over time, which we see a lot of in the historic district. Is that a condition that this board wants to continue with? Seen thumbs up from Jim.
I think that's,
Okay, no opposition.
that's tough. Dark colors could be reflective.
Does staff or
I don't-
CPS? Yeah, go
I
ahead.
don't know how you define reflective on this.
Chris or Lucy, would you guys have any comments here on kind of the application of this? If you've seen in other communities of anti-reflective material, how that's sort of defined or approved or tested?
Honestly, I don't know that I've read into it much before, regarding how to apply this. I can do a little research real quick, see if I can find anything in some of the other communities we use. That would be helpful for you guys.
I mean, it seems like black, gray, and charcoal often like absorb the light.
I imagine we have to look at this from like a common sense standpoint, like, you know, this isn't a clearly defined standard, but if we're gonna have this condition, then common sense dictates that like bright silver would be reflective and things that are not bright silver would not be reflective. That's my reading of this condition as recommended by the Historic Review Committee.
And this is just on the metal.
Yeah.
Right. No one's like painting the metal some crazy color.
Right, right. And again, it could start out as silver, but rusting over time. I mean, again, we have lots of applications of that in town, yeah. So there's a couple sample options there on 34. Page 34.
I move to approve case 24-13, a historic overlay and A-Rod application for exterior building alterations on an existing residential structure within the Architectural Review Overlay District and the Historic Overlay District located at 1104 Blair Street as presented, finding the historic overlay and A-Rod application is in conformance with Code 16-4-5 and 16-4-6 of the SMC, with the following conditions that the corrugated metal is non-reflective.
Second.
Thanks. Roll call, please, Melina.
Trustee Halverson,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee Schnitger,
Yes.
trustee Wakefield,
No.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harper.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, thanks. Staff, to applicant.
Motion.
Oh, yeah, fee waiver, right. So in addition to this request, there's been a request for the fee waiver. Since we currently don't have a process for someone to make administrative changes, it's an entirely new application. So the board can consider whether they would like to waive the fee for this second revised application, or not. So thanks for catching that, guys. Board discussion.
I'd support a fee waiver. I think that this process, not having a space for this type of change doesn't mean that we need to charge them an application fee again.
I agree.
I think we've said all along, you know, just being in favor of making processes when we can simpler. And when we're having units that add housing, that add rental, that add space and density, like incentivizing that. So I'd support a fee waiver. I saw Jim thumbs up. Tyler or Ron?
Yeah, I would support the waiving the fee.
All right, there's sample motions on page 35.
I move to approve the fee waiver request for case 24-13, historic overlay A-Rod application for exterior building alterations on an existing residential structure within the Architectural Review Overlay District and Historic Overlay District located at 1104 Blair Street as presented, finding the fee waiver request is in conformance with section 17-1-90 of the Silverton Municipal Code.
Second.
Great, roll call please, Melina?
Trustee Halverson,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
Yes.
trustee Wakefield,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harper.
Yes.
Yes. Great, thank you. Now, thank you, staff and applicant.
Thank you.
All right, moving on in our agenda, we're on to 4B, traffic impact fee amendment discussion. And I'll kick it to staff. We have John Seitz on the line. I think we also have some community engagement, so go ahead.
We do. So last year, the board passed a resolution to impose a fee on trucks hauling through town. This is the first year of implementation. We do have some issues that have been brought up from local contractors. To give you context, the county has exempted local contractors from their fee. And I think Anthony's in, yep, hi, Anthony. Anthony Castronova requested to speak during this agenda item, and then we might have someone online I can't see from here, but you want to come on up, Anthony?
To hear from John Seitz first.
Okay, awesome. Great. All right, John, go ahead.
Sure. So we've got what we're working with here is a relatively young piece of code that was put into effect by Reso 2023-11. And we're really in our first year of trying to enforce this piece of code. And we've run into a couple of questions for the trustees. And one thing about the code that I'm not crazy about is it's not very descriptive about who's on the hook for the fees, whether it's the entity, the owner, or the contractor. It says all three. So I would like to take a crack at making that code language more clear, for one. And also, it was brought to my attention by Anthony as well as Pete Meisel that this code is also not written in such a way that it could or could not affect a local contractor's business adversely. And for that, I would like you to be the judge as trustees, and whether or not we would like to include some language that may exempt local contractors from being affected by this piece of code. And what else can I say about it? Why don't we just jump into it? I guess we could let Anthony say his piece about it and then have a little discussion.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I think.
Hey guys, first of all, thank you for your time. The way this code's written cripples my local business. The only hope I have of surviving here is to be able to provide my product for cheaper than you can source it elsewhere by sourcing it from a local entity that I created here because there frankly isn't one. I come from 3 and 5 generations of excavation, road building on multiple sides of my family, processing large heavy materials for resale, building spec aggregates and structural fills for construction. I'm the one that makes all the gravel for our town of Silverton and all the streets for the last 3 years. I've been coming to Silverton for 22 years now. I moved my business here 3.5 years ago now, and I was told that with all our reclamation process that's undergoing, the EPA would have to use local contractors if they existed. So I moved my business. This is my 18th year in business, by the way, with the same entity that is now a Silverton business. I live over by the school. My girlfriend also moved here to try and start a life here. She's currently your schooling clinic nurse and one of our newest paramedics. I'm a search and rescue volunteer, also one of our team leads that does training and certifications of snow machines. The way this is written, it doesn't give me a competitive edge to be able to stay $1 per ton cheaper than you could source it elsewhere. If you can call Durango or Montrose or somewhere else and call 3 different companies and have them bring 3 different orders to your job site, how do we police who's responsible if the hauler, and there's multiple haulers, who chases after the dump trucks? John is taxed with so many different things. I understand the need for this and to look into the future for our roadways and our infrastructure that's failing. The company that I brought here, I'm trying to serve these needs and be our local contractor that provides infrastructure, repairs, services, aggregates. I can't make everything that is of demand from where I reside out in Middleton at the only permitted gravel pit in our county. We don't have any clean topsoil. I have to either make it from scratch using slashed products from our fire mitigation clearing, recycling them over many years into clean, locally sourced topsoil that's not contaminated, or I need to bring it from other places and store it and process it into something that I can sell to people. That involves me bringing from out of town through town to my gravel pit in Middleton, which is the only place I can find suitable to run my operations, processing that material and then bringing it back into the city to hopefully sell to my clients. If I can stay competitive, and you can't just call somewhere else and get it cheaper and not need to be accountable for what this TIF tax is trying to provide. Putting the tax on the project would force the project to be accountable for the materials it used. And it would also let the policing of this tax, the town inspector could say, hold back the certificate of occupancy until there's been proof of how much weight and material has been used on each project and set forth such tax to that project. There could be so many different haulers hauling to one project, it seems impossible to police from my perspective. The only money I can really make on these products is my delivery, and I can really only get $10 per ton because otherwise I can't be competitive from sourcing outside the county. For instance, if I'm trying to provide a firewood service for the county and for the city, for me to bring logs from our clearing projects on the heli-logging operations on our power lines, to bring the logs through town, store them out in Middleton, process them into firewood, and then deliver them back, the way this is written, would cost $5 for me to bring it through town the first time, then cost $5 for me to bring it back to town to sell it, which is 100% of the delivery charge that I can charge to stay competitive at $10. that would cripple my business. I'm already paying 37% in gravel royalty tax to the landowners for the materials that I source locally from the county. The other stuff I have to outsource, that would effectively take more than 100% if you calculate wear and tear, insurance, fuel, and all the other fees that you incur being someone that does specialized transport. I was under the impression that when this code was written, it was not to affect local contractors. It was to specifically tax the EPA projects going on in this county. The way it's written, it doesn't really say whether it does or not, but it doesn't not say that it taxes the local entity that I've given my life's work to create here to try and serve everything. And I could go on and on about a whole bunch of other stuff, but I think I've kind of made the point here. It's really, really, really difficult to run this kind of business in this kind of environment with the short work season that we have and all the heavy equipment you have to process this high silica, hardest rock on the planet, frankly. And it's very difficult. I'm sorry for my appearance. I've been working since 3:45 this morning, trying to keep everybody happy and get everything done before winter because we don't know when it's coming. My equipment's abused. The roadways to and from getting out to my pit and back, my shock absorbers are broken, my frames are cracked, my suspension's cracked. This is hauling under what Colorado has deemed legally safe weights. I'm at my wit's end pretty much, and financially and physically doing everything I possibly can to survive. And the way this is written would cripple this local business. I think we could probably leave it at that. If you guys have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
One question I had is, do you have any experience of how this has played out in other communities? Like, again,
I didn't know this existed anywhere else, honestly, but I understand the need for it. And also, I owned a paving company for the last, 15 years of my business plus 3 and 5 generations. Like, I'm the one that makes your gravel. I'm the one that serves, John with his materials to maintain your roads. I'm the one, hopefully, that will be paving the roads. Also, I try not to drive my dump trucks down Green Street because there's a zombie apocalypse 2 to 3 times a day in Silverton that causes a major problem and hazard for me running a business that I've never had a complaint. I've never had an injury. I've never had a lawsuit. I have an excellent rating on the Better Business Bureau. I have a Dun & Bradshaw number. I have never had a blemish on my record. I've never even been to court in business because I do business a certain way. And this leaves me very exposed. And also, if I was to be charging my customers over a certain amount, why am I hearing about it a year after this was written? Maybe that's my fault. I don't know, but I was under the impression based on what Shane told me and everybody else, and then what the county inducted this year, to sort of attach to what you guys are putting last year, that this did not affect local businesses. This was to help push work to local businesses, not take away my ability to be competitive with everyone else that you could call to bring, you could call 5 different companies to haul stuff. And then who's to say how much was hauled? How do you get records? Like, am I supposed to open my books to prove? Thankfully, the only large job I had this year was technically building city roads on the project at the corner of town. So that's exempt from this because the gravel that was delivered is now city roads, and you guys are exempt. And I guess it's exempt when I bring gravel to the city, but what if I want to process material and sell it back to people, which is the whole source of my business? So I've tried to create this local entity to serve the EPA needs, the reclamation needs, the city, the county needs, and everything else. And I just think there should be an exemption. So this doesn't, I know the intent of this code wasn't to cripple. Like, there's only really one local hauling business except for Pete, who's about to retire soon. And that's why I created this, because there's a demand. And there's so many other companies coming in and capitalizing and not being policed, and who knows what they're bringing where and when. How do we, there's 25 different hauling companies working just for the repository job. And how do, is John supposed to chase dump trucks around? Like, like, at least if it was imposed on the project, the project would have to be accountable for what they used before they were granted their final, CO or, permit status.
Thanks, Tony.
So, yeah.
Other questions from the trustees for Tony?
Tony, how many tons can you usually haul in a dump truck?
A truck and pump with an oversized permit is allowed to be 96,000 for over 5 axles for a truck and dump trailer. If it's a regular 10-wheel dump truck, 55,000 is what Colorado says. If it's a super dump, it's I think 80,000.
You normally run?
I have 5 trucks. It depends on what Ron needs. I'm also trying to work with Bevan and the rest of the city to bring our garbage in-house so we have more control over. We're not getting taken advantage of by outside companies. And my recommendation to Bevan and to John and everyone else was it's too much for me to handle by myself, but I can handle the transport of it. You guys police your own garbage. I'll bring it to the transfer stations and the dumps for you guys, and we can work together. All these ways are ways I'm trying to help our community, including the community service that we do.
Thanks. All right, maybe some time for trustee conversation with staff. You can stay up there, have a seat, whatever you're most comfortable. Thank you. Thanks for coming. So again, I think for some of our newer board members, this really came up as we saw the significant increase that might come from the EPA projects happening, right? And we had nothing in place, and recognizing that there was going to be significant impact potentially to our roads and our infrastructure. And again, as we're all talking about it earlier in our budget session, is how do we help the folks that are having the impact on our services and our infrastructure help share that cost? I think, John, it would be great to maybe hear a little bit from you and Gloria kind of about how this has gone over the summer, because I do see the real challenges. And, we have an entire project, which is the EPA working on the reclamation site. We have a very large development going on at the other end of town. This was never intended to be for like a random dump truck. Like, I'll use a great example. We got some gravel delivered this week to our house, right? As the homeowner, it was probably under 50. It was probably under the limit, but like at what point is the contractor adding that up, et cetera. So the intent of this was kind of to really target the heavy users, I would say. But implementing that at the policy level is a little bit tricky, and at the enforcement level. And again, we're striking this balance around, again, supporting local contractors as well as balancing the impact that some of these projects might have on our services and our infrastructure. So John and Gloria, do you guys have kind of comments on this from a staff perspective of implementing it over the summer this year?
Yes. I know that Gloria has been writing down every truck company that she sees as she walks to and from work.
Really?
And I think that's a great idea. One thing that I think we can do on the staff level is that I mentioned is not tonight, but with Gloria, is that we should contact every trucking company within 100-mile radius and let them know what our expectations are. However, when you have a project the size of what the EPA is doing, there are so many trucks coming and going that other projects may get lost in the mix. And that actually did happen with Anthony's company and the project that's going on down at the south side of town, where he was over, but there's so many trucks, who's doing what? It is difficult to track this. And that's something that I think that we could do as well to the code, to improve the code, to improve our efforts towards keeping track of this stuff. So I regardless of how you feel about the local issue, the local business impact issue, I think that we need to go through this resolution again, because it could use some improving.
Thanks for that, John. We were trying to get it done quickly to have something in place. And so I think we got that at least, but it sounds like it needs some finessing.
Yeah.
So is the board Let's start with that piece in general. So this traffic impact fee in general, how does the board feel about staff kind of reworking, tweaking it? We can have the conversation about local contractor exemptions, but just in general tweaking it for the overall implementation of that. How does the board feel about that?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think right now it's unsustainable. It's great that you're tracking them down on your way to work, but it can be unsustainable to continue doing that as our only means of monitoring.
Seems like.
Yeah, I think the tracking and collecting and enforcement is just, again, we were trying to get something in place, and I think, you know, it was important too, because Green Street is going to need, you know, to be repaved or fixed at some point. But I don't think we put our staff in a great monitor and collect. So, and we did try when we were first writing it to, instead of making exemptions for local contractors, I think what we thought was, you know, smaller projects will be under a certain weight limit.
Yeah.
And so the smaller projects hopefully wouldn't have gotten hit, but also, again, with the amount of trucks that everybody sees every day, like it's not feasible for our staff to try and figure out who's doing what and hauling what where. So I don't know if you have any suggestions, John, on how we could rewrite that. Is it a project size? Can we put it towards the developer, or do you have any ideas about that?
Well, the one reason why we're asking you to give us some time to work on it is because, you know, this, we would like to take the time to do it right and hopefully not have to do it again. And there are a lot of little details here that we want to be able to have enough time to think through everything. So in the next meeting or two, we would like to present you with language that would be much improved, that you could look at and say, okay, we're going to go for this. And that would address things like owner, entity, and or contractor. Well, how do we dig into that and get a little bit deeper and more specific? Being more descriptive about the project type, the project size really doesn't matter. What matters is 50 tons, and we still think that that's a good number. So just asking the trustees for some time to present you with a better option than what we have at the moment.
Are the trustees comfortable with that staff direction?
Sounds good.
Okay, great. All right, now moving on to the discussion, if we want to give direction around kind of local contractor exemption, I'd love to hear a little bit of conversation around that. And or we could also ask John and Gloria to kind of propose some options. So putting it to trustees for discussion around that particular piece in any future resolution language.
The only drawback I can see with that is if someone is here doing a bunch of work, they can decide they are a local contractor and really not be one.
So we'd have to define local contractor.
Yes.
Basically to solve there. Yeah. Business is registered in town.
They don't have a business license and they're not a local contractor.
That's right.
I'd be kind of curious about scope, because again, I think, you know, we're working with these dual things. I really appreciated your kind of feedback, Tony, and your insight. I'm also kind of, as a public official, thinking, well, like if we have one local contractor that is having 100% of the impact on the roads, how do we manage that going forward? You know, and so I think potentially thinking about this in terms of like a project level, that it has to be managed from kind of a project or client base seems kind of interesting to me, because then it's not staff and or the haulers working through it. It's really like the project manager who's having, like, if we just said to the EPA, you have to keep track of how many tons of stuff have come to your site, and we are going to issue you a bill, and it's your job to bill everybody. Yeah. As opposed to staff trying to keep track, or if there's a big development, you know, we're not trying to use this for someone's building a single family home and got a bunch of material for it. We're using it more as like bigger projects. And so I just wonder if we can manage this more on the client level. If that can make more sense, but yeah.
To give you an idea, 50 tons is a load and a half.
Yeah.
Every project that's built uses at least 300 tons of 50. There's 50 tons in every driveway in Silverton. That's a very light number, and okay, again, I understand why we need it. But I think the only way to regulate it is to put it on the project and be able to hold back something to force them to be accountable. And right now we're asking the EPA already, like, well, who's hauling, who's this, who's that? They have to be accountable for everything they use on their sites anyway. It's really easy to say, okay, well, show us how much you used, and here's what you have to pay accordingly.
Yeah.
And then and a local contractor exemption. That way I can bring logs through town and bring firewood back, and I can bring raw topsoil through town and bring screen topsoil back, and do the specialized hauling service and processing service that I do to serve this community. That's why I think there should be a local exemption, because we have so many local resources that we can use with the fire mitigation, specifically on the power lines with the heli logging. That's giving us a clean local resource that's organic, that I can process into something we don't have here, which is clean topsoil for the future, which is firewood for us to not need to use outside sources and be bringing different beetles in and different insects in from other counties. This is sourced here with what we already have, and it's staying here if we word this right. And I think that's a valuable asset to our community.
Thanks. John, did you have something to add there?
No.
Okay, thanks. All right, yeah, trustee discussion.
I mean, when I remember watching the meeting last year and thinking like, yeah, this was intended for the 800 trucks going to the repository, not necessarily like for local loggers, right? Like that was the original intent, and it just wasn't designed like in a way that worked out in that way. So we just need to redesign it with that intent in mind, right?
It's up for debate. That's a discussion.
I think they do this in Mississippi. I'm trying to like remember where I read this, because they have a lot of like oil and gas trucks using their roads in Mississippi. And so I think it's the Department of Transportation there implements some sort of fee, but that just might be like an interesting like way to look at it, like how do they actually administer it as well? I doubt they go out there and count every like BP truck they see.
Yeah. Gloria.
You are amazing, Gloria.
Concerned as well on how we were policing this. We decided to start a log this summer. Walk down the middle of Main Street on my way here and my way to lunch and back.
This is the town administrator we have, guys.
I wish I'd have known to sit outside in front of my house and counted with you.
Yeah, Jim.
Thank you. When we had the first, or maybe the final discussion, but I remember it was the first discussion, we had it with a outfit out of Montrose. And one of the talking points and one of the discussion points was that they would be providing this information to us. How many trucks, how many times a day? The reporting should be provided to us by the trucking company. And I remember that in that daytime meeting that we had.
When we were chatting with the EPA about how many trucks they actually thought, what kind of truck apocalypse we were gonna face. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And the EPA does do that. But
And that's how we were gonna.
private contractors, we don't necessarily have that wording in our.
And by private contractors, do you mean private hauling contractors or private construction and building contractors?
Anyone that's not associated with the EPA.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think this all came up because we had two big projects. EPA is obviously vastly large, and then we had a large construction project at the entrance of town, and wanting to recognize the impacts that both of those have. Go ahead, Jim.
And I know from all the discussions we've had over the years that no one on the town level, trustees, or want to impact any local with regards to these fees. That was never a part of the discussion.
like to propose a scenario where the town pays me $5 a ton for the hazard it creates with its tourism. It's like, some people are told they get $1,000 reward if they can get their whole family across the street. Down the road with no one behind it. They're not even going anywhere on that side of the street, but they see a truck coming and they run. They're like, it's not like, hurry up. It's like the more people they get in front of it, the more, like, the more money they get. Like, they're told this is a ghost town. These aren't real people. These are actors. These aren't real dump trucks. Like, I'd rather drive down any street but Green Street, even if it involves stop signs and turns, because it's, because I.
Yeah. Force our jaywalking code a little bit stricter.
Any other comments online? Tyler, you were here when we originally discussed this. Anything else you want to bring up or add? Oh, I think you're on mute. We'd love to hear you.
Yeah. So I think, again, one of the things that we should think about when we're throwing it back to staff is, for these larger projects, and I think Tony brought this up earlier, is should it be projects or the haulers? And I know, I don't know enough about, hauling or these big projects to make that decision, but I'm sure that somebody else out there has done this. And that way, I think also if it's a small project, like it's a single family home and we're moving some dirt, that's easy enough for our people to assess on their building permit. And then if it's a larger development, hopefully that's easier for our people to assess on their building permit. And then it might not be left up to the trucking company. But again, I think that's something to consider. It's not my area of expertise.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I think the question that comes to my mind as a staff member is, do you want to exempt local contractors under certain conditions? And then do you want to give us direction to work on this code language? If the answer to the first question is yes, and it's really, let's say it's just one contractor. Let's just say it's Tony, OE. He has one project in the next month. You could say, okay, I'm doing this wood project. Can you exempt me from this? You could say yes, I believe, and Clayton could back me up on that. And then the next piece of direction would be, staff, please bring us some better language here so that we can do better in the future.
Yeah. I think even our current transportation impact fee specifies that the entity owner or contractor can file an objection, basically saying the fees established herein will substantially impact the viability of the applicant's development or will have a disproportionate impact on the applicant's development in relation to other applicants. I mean, that's kind of what we heard. And then you ask the question, well, who's the applicant? Is that Tony? Is it that? It's all a little bit goofy. So I'm hearing common recommendations that we want to improve this language. And the question before us is, do we exempt the current contractor in front of us? That's what we're considering. Is this Tony using his right to file an objection to this? And or do we want the code in the future to have exemptions for local contractors?
Right. And I think that code language is inadequate because it doesn't say anything about Tony hauling materials through town to process to resell locally or elsewhere. And it affects his business directly. Doesn't affect a development or another project. It's a private business venture. Code language is inadequate, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think I'd be in favor of a local exemption, certainly for now, and then the future code language having some sort of exemption, maybe depending on scale. I'm still sort of stuck on this, like, scale of impact still feels a little bit relevant to me for the public interest. So I'm sort of contemplating this idea of scale, but I don't have enough expertise to tell you what that scale is. But that's just my personal opinion.
And yeah, again, when we Anthony Edwards brought this to us, what we said 50 tons a night, to me, again, not an expert, that sounded like a lot. That sounded like a huge project. And then finding out now that that's a pretty small project, like that's also where I'm at. Cause I do think, Green Street's gonna need work at some point. So I am in favor of exemptions for local contractors, but also then at what point is like the scale of the project so big that there needs to be some sort of reconsideration.
I mean, is it as simple as just saying that for local contractors that we'd have to define, the threshold is much higher before the fee is charged? Like, and they still have the
project.
The
The only way to police it and to accurately make a project accountable isn't to tax the shovel. It's to tax the hand or the brain. And I see the need for this tax. I mean, we have to think for our future, but we can't cripple the only valuable entity that we have.
Is there any disagreement on having a local exemption and having some sort of threshold? If we gave that direction to staff on an additional draft? Ron, what are you thinking?
Well, I mean, I understand Tony's position, but I also know that our roads are gonna wear out shortly, so maybe it would be best to raise their limit, I guess, like you guys suggested.
It strikes me here, John, that we're kind of spitballing when we are not experts, so I think I would trust you and Gloria to work with our contractors to think about the projects and to think about what would make sense. Again, this is kind of like the committee sitting, well, do we want purple flowers or red flowers? Well, let's let staff just do their job and figure it out.
I would appreciate that. And I think whether it's 50 tons or 500,000 tons, if someone needs 100 tons to do a project to build a house, then they can afford to pay that tax. And it's not on Tony, but Tony being a contractor could be the one that conveys that information to us. But that's just an example of one way in which we can rewrite the code to make it better.
Yeah, scale matters. Yeah, Tony, last comments?
Basically, if a project is applying for a permit, that would suggest that they need more than a minimum amount to achieve what they're trying to build. And then it seems to me that the city would have leverage making them accountable for what they've used, holding back what they want in the end to get their project done. That's kind of the only way it makes sense for me, because I do see the need for this. But to tax the local guy that's trying to create a product on his way through town, it doesn't seem right. But the project itself, yeah, I mean, why not? And that way, everybody is on the same playing field. I can still offer my product cheaper than you can call and order your gravel that you just got from somewhere else.
Talk to Cody. I mean. Yeah. All right, John, does that feel like decent direction? Does that feel clear?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. Any other trustee comments?
Question for you, Tony.
Yes, sir.
You guys are hauling a bunch of gravel from the town today, or spoils? Have been, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So then you wouldn't be responsible for paying it. Supposedly the town would, which they wouldn't. Is that correct?
The way it's written, it sounds like I'm supposed to impose this tax on my customer and then be responsible for collecting it and paying you guys for it, which seems to push business to someone that's not local, that doesn't have to be accountable to that. Thankfully, this project on the edge of town, all those spoils came from your streets. All the gravel went into your street. So really, if the town's exempt, that was Shane's point. Everything has been done in the actual streets. No work has been done inside the actual lots yet there.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes that project exempt. And we were also told, I told them, I'm not moving the spoils until this gets resolved. And I guess you guys made that not applicable because it's spoils coming from the street to the place of stone that went into your streets.
Thanks. All right, I think we're clear. Thanks, John. I'm glad we have this in place and now we can fine tune it after we've tried it out for a summer. Gloria, no more counting trucks.
Oh, it's a habit now.
It's like, where's Waldo?
When I see a new one, I'm like, ooh. Have that one on there.
So just to be clear though, for the time being, like the process would be for someone like Tony to come and get an exemption. Like currently. That's, until we get something else in place.
Written.
Yeah.
It's end of the season. I don't know.
Well, right. But just to be clear, like where we are at this
Yeah.
moment.
And if you are granting Tony an exemption tonight, I would ask for a motion.
You might just have to make up the language or was there a motion?
I mean, it says temporary.
Not a motion in there.
So.
We were seeking direction, but we can, if it's a specific one, I would like a motion.
If we have that exemption, can't we just handle it on an individual basis?
Exactly.
That would be real easy to do.
Would you like staff to do that or would you like to exempt them?
Me personally.
I mean, as the board.
I'm happy for staff to handle it administratively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think that we need this,
Okay.
to be cleaned up regardless. I think that, yeah, that doesn't need to be something that comes to the board, in my opinion.
Well, then we don't need a motion.
I think we're good.
Directed and exempted as applied.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you guys very much. Great to know that
You.
things like this exist. We'll have a conversation.
We love people in.
Still are here and still live here and still are alive. This wasn't something written in the 1800s.
We love having audience members. All right, we're moving on to agenda item 4C. A resolution authorizing the town of Silverton to open a cash handling account with Citizens State Bank for the deposit of large sums of cash.
Pretty straightforward. We have a lot of cash now because of the NEC showers and it's really nerve wracking to have to drive to Durango with thousands of dollars in $1 bills and fives and 20s. So we really needed to reopen an account here in town so that we can not have so much cash.
Oh, just to reopen?
Well,
Yes,
we had accounts with Citizens before.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to close our account in January. That was part of the whole Mullis issue that we had. And there was some fraud, so we had to close that. But this one would just be a cash handling account. And we would then transfer funds over to our general account when we hit a threshold.
And during the winter, Kendall needs change, so it would be nice to have a.
Thank you.
You can get that way.
Makes sense. Any opposition? I'm hearing a lot of support. Any opposition online? We talked about this in finance committee. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, support it.
All right. I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2024-19, authorizing the town of Silverton to open a cash handling account with Citizens State Bank.
I've got a question before we go any
Oh,
further.
sure.
It says large sums of cash. Do we really just want to put for the deposit of cash instead of large sums because then we have to define?
It's large sums,
It's thousands of dollars in cash.
thousands.
You'd be able to deposit small sums. Sure.
Yeah, right now it's.
That's just in like the cash account, so it's just like, That's
Yeah.
before the,
Well,
now
it does,
therefore.
it's part of the memo. Yeah, well,
That is in the language of the resolution.
The language,
resolution.
we can definitely amend that if needed.
Make it cash.
Just make it small.
So if we want to do that, Amy, you could retract your motion.
I will retract my motion.
And then we can make an additional motion with the condition that the resolution just includes deposit of cash. So if someone would like to make that motion.
Oh, now I got stressed. Okay, I will make a motion to approve resolution 2419, authorizing the town of Silverton to open a cash handling account with Citizens Bank with the condition that the resolution be edited to, what do we say? Wait, just deposits of cash.
Clear? Clayton, does that feel clear enough?
Yes, that's perfectly clear. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, motion by Lindsay, seconded by Ron. Roll call, please.
Ms. Robertson?
Yes.
Trustee Gardner?
Yes.
Yes.
Trustee Wakefield?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harper,
Yes.
Mayor Cranker.
Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to 4D, Resolution 2024-20, a resolution adopting a fee schedule for the use of setting facility rental fees.
Okay, and so this one has gone to the Finance Committee and then the
Facilities and Parks Committee.
Facilities, Parks and Rec Committee a couple times. I don't think actually it went to the Finance Committee, yes. But it came to you all. So it went to the Facilities, Parks and Rec Committee a couple times. And basically this is an increase to non-locals. And it keeps the local price that we currently have now, which is 30% off. And it also keeps those peak times and non-peak times.
I think what was attractive to this about the Facilities and Parks Committee conversation was that, again, we're seeing real high demand for renting Kendall. It is a revenue source. It's a building that needs to be maintained and kept up. And so this is a great way to do that, making sure that the fees for it are actually covering the costs of the building and staff that have to support it. And it was really important to find the Facilities and Parks Committee to really still keep it as a community center for locals. So that's why having that discount, while also acknowledging that we have the discount for locals, so you can rent it at a discounted rate even during peak times, and also really creating as a space during non-peak times for nonprofits and other local entities. So that felt like a good balance of maximizing the use of the facility during peak weekends, while also creating a local discount and while also supporting our local nonprofits and organizations.
The only thing I noticed is the baseball helicopter landing. I asked Gloria about it. I was like, who, I mean, besides like, because EMS obviously exempted.
Whoever rents this.
We have a code that says no helicopters here, so we were kind of contemplating who would be using that.
Then I was like, I don't know, I've heard that helicopters are coming to town, like, could we jack this thing up and make a little bit of money? But for people who are flying from Aspen, to come and ski. Just saying, but no helicopters in town.
Yeah, don't worry, there's a local discount.
You want to get there, fly away in your helicopter. Land in the baseball field too. Beautiful baseball field. But we do have an ordinance that says no helicopters in town.
Yes.
Yeah, so. No. Okay.
Just funny one.
Even with these increases for Kendall, I still think it's a deal. And people will continue booking.
Yeah, I just went to a wedding this weekend in California and my friend spent $28,000 on the venue for 2 days.
On the venue.
So this venue's deal.
Yeah, it was like a vineyard. It was very beautiful, but.
I know, something gonna say, like.
They could even be, yeah.
They're laughing. It sounds like there is potential appetite to go even higher. So Gloria, I think you could mention that to Sarah, but maybe we try this for a year. I know we're going to be informing current bookings of this increase. And so we could see how that affects the future year. But I think we're going to also run into this challenge of, again, Kendall is what, 20 years old. We're going to eventually need some more repair and work on it. And we'll reach a price point where the asset has to match the price as well.
And in the 2025 budget, I haven't been able to do it yet on the software end, but we are breaking out Kendall as its own fund. So we'll be able to kind of see those cost breakdowns a little bit better, plan for capital better.
And there potentially are more ways that we can think of Kendall revenue in that asset, especially for non-locals.
I met a guy who did the Land Rover thing this year that we approved, and he said it was so fun. They're gonna come back every year. They loved it. They loved being at Kendall. They loved the town. They ate in town. So I just feel like people love that area.
Great.
That's
great.
Good place to get married.
Any other questions about the fees? I think there is a little bit of a culture change with like Memorial Park. You know, we went to a birthday party and like, I don't think there's a lot of community members that know like, oh, I want to just show up and use gazebo. So we might have a bit of communication piece around that. And it's also like, we're not forbidding people to like picnic in the park.
No, not at all.
So I think just making sure that it's clear to people what they're getting when they pay for it and also like,
And they need to pay for it.
when they need to pay for it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see, we need a motion to approve this fee schedule, don't we?
Yep.
Yes,
It's a resolution
resolution on
for 20.
67.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2024-20, a resolution adopting a fee schedule for the use of facility rental fees.
Second.
Okay, roll call please, Marie.
Trustee Halverson?
Yes.
Trustee Gardner?
Yes.
Trustee Schnitger?
Yes.
Trustee Wakefield?
Yes.
Trustee George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harper?
Yes.
Mayor Cranker?
Yes. All right, great. Thanks, guys. All right, moving on to consent agenda. Any comments on the consent agenda? There's a letter of support in there. Thank you, Gloria, for including that. I wanted to mention that I was not accosted, but approached at the 150th about getting this letter of support in the packet. So thank you.
The only thing I had to drop off Zoom because my internet gave out. I don't know if that needs to be noted in here. I didn't.
Oh, for your attendance?
Yeah, for my
To
attendance.
amend the minutes?
Yeah, is that important?
I wasn't here for that one. I don't.
My stupid internet.
I can.
So mad.
If I amend it in these minutes, does that?
Yeah, you can say with that amendment.
Right, we can approve the consent agenda with
Yeah, with the
amendments.
amendment.
Yeah.
Trustee Halverson was not able to attend the whole meeting.
Yeah.
Like that, yeah. All right, would anybody like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda with that amendment?
So moved.
Second.
Great, thanks. Roll call please, Melina. We'll do roll call in just a second. We'll wait till Amy. Sorry.
Trustee Halverson?
Yes.
Trustee Gardner?
Yes.
Trustee Schnitger?
Yes.
Trustee Wakefield?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harper?
Yes.
Mayor Cranker?
Yes. Okay, I'm gonna keep us cooking, guys. Staff reports.
Okay, let me find my notes on this one. I've got some good news. We received our $110,000 grant for our leak detection system. We are still working out the details of that with them because part of it was for a 10-year subscription and they typically don't do that in grant reporting. So we're still working on the details. We also received our $5,000 for accessible tables, picnic tables. And we received $200,000 in prize money from the Department of Energy to continue our Team Gold work for the microgrid. So good news there, celebrating there. The Public Works Director position will be posted this week. And then the other one is we have one member who will not be able to make our retreat on the 8th. So I have the space in the facilitator reserved. If you have availability that week or next week, I could reschedule. It might, our facilitator might not be available. It's ideal that we have everyone there. And to set our priorities before we complete the budget so that you all have that. But this is an unfortunate circumstance, so.
Like the week after or that week of the 8th?
I have availability.
So I could send out another I'm just worried about our facilitator. It's taking me so long to get him.
Is he available at all the rest of that week?
I don't know. So I'm approaching you all first on the best way to handle this and then I can work on rescheduling.
I'm available the 7th, 9th, and 10th
Yeah.
of October.
I'm around.
Same.
Is everyone else available 7th, 9th, and 10th?
No.
No, okay. How,
I'm not available in this event.
all right, how about I send out some emails
Another doodle poll.
and try this again? If I can't get anything for the month of October and we have to go to November, would you guys like to do that? I mean, it's just not ideal, not.
Right, the less desirable options are proceed without one member
Mhm.
or go into November, which rhymes, which is not as ideal for budget and priority setting. But our budget priority is going to be set for us because of the amount of money we're able to spend.
Okay, so I will reach out to the facilitator, see if he's available. He's free, so we work around his schedule.
Patrick is great.
Patrick's awesome.
CML, right?
Or DOLA.
Department of Local Affairs regional manager here.
Right, and he's watched us for a long time. He remembers the time when chairs were thrown in this building. Fun. Yeah.
Great for context. And look for an email from me this Friday, hopefully. So. Okay, that's all I have for staff reports, unless you have questions on the reports in there.
Any questions from trustees on staff reports? Congrats, all the grants.
Yeah, it was a great team.
A lot of stuff happening. Okay, all right, we'll move on to committee and board reports. First one up is Historic Review Committee. I think we had Jim at that one. Was it just Jim? Oh, you on that one?
I wasn't able,
Right,
so.
so Jim was there. All right, Jim, anything else to add? We heard the land use application today. Anything else to add?
No, it was a very good meeting, about 29 minutes long. And we discussed exactly what we talked about this evening.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Jim? All right, moving on, Finance Committee. We basically discussed everything we talked about from 5 to 7 today. And we talked about the cash handling account, so you all are thoroughly up to speed. Planning Commission meeting. Lindsay, Jim?
Another exhilarating planning commission. A lot of stuff happening in the county, mostly stuff happening in the county. So there's an application for the Opus Hut. Oh, Jim, I'm missing one. There was another one.
There was the chief load, which is the breed project, mine claim.
Yeah.
That was approved unanimous. The Opus Hut was approved unanimous.
And then I'm so glad we did our land use update and work session. I think that was really helpful for the planning commission. Those folks really got into it. What buildings should be built like. It was great. It was a good discussion.
They were promoting condos on the hillside. I was like, that was never in the land use code. Okay.
No, they don't want condos on the hillside. No, I think it currently the way it's written is what the BP, one of the hillside does allow for condos up there in the new draft. So that was some discussion. And then, oh man. This is like, I know I'm not a developer. There was talk about how things should be built. So good conversation. I'm really glad we did it and that Clarion was there.
Yeah, they did a very good job.
Yeah. Bulk plane designs, square footage made sense to them. We did talk about building height, and 45 did seem to be too high. But with some exemptions there, like, the mechanical elevators. So that was kind of it. I'm just really glad we did that. I still am a little concerned that they want more time to review everything. So
now's the time.
Yeah.
Now is the time, folks.
You see Ken around.
About coming back to them in October.
when the next draft is out, and then hopefully for adoption in November.
And it gets recommended or adopted by the planning commission and then comes to the board. And are we scheduled to have a work session?
Yes, you all will have one on the 28th of October, I believe.
Thanks. Okay.
Or the 14th, one of those days. I'll have to double check.
All right, thanks, planning commission folks. Bonita Peak Mining District meeting. Is that, you're talking about the site visit or?
Oh, no, we had a meeting.
Oh,
yeah, we had a boring meeting and not, the site visit was awesome.
Site visit was very, let's hear about the boring meeting.
Yeah, wants to talk about water. It was a response to a letter, and going through different issues that some previous members had with the way that the EPA was operating. So kind of walked through a variety of issues and more of like a conversation type meeting. So it was very nerdy. I am unfortunately not a scientist, and so some of it did go over my head. I will say that.
Thanks for being there.
Yeah. If anyone knows more about, chemistry.
Well, we're crossing with the citizen advisory groups. And this letter was in response to a lot of the items were regarding the citizen advisory group. And, like where they were taking samples, and it got pretty technical for the Bonita Peak mining group, so.
Well, thanks for being there. Gloria and I got to see chemistry in action. We got to do a site visit, and Amy. We got to do a site visit to all the different areas. So we went up to Forking, we went in the tunnels, we got to go in the water treatment plant. And they showed us the polymers that they mixed and how quickly the polymers would glob onto the heavy metals and leave the water. It was all super exciting. Really neat to see what's happening. And again, cleaning a lot of water. We also have just a lot of natural loading in water. So
That was discussed as well.
yeah.
Pete Meisel did. I can't go on the Colorado tour. So he just bugged me about that again, that someone should be going on that tour. And I think Jim, you're going, right? Yeah.
Nice.
Great.
So jealous. It's fun.
So the site visits were really great. And thanks, Jim, for representing us.
Always.
All right. I think that's the last of our meetings. Now on to trustee reports. I had two things. Oh, go ahead.
We did have a board of adjustments thing.
Yeah, down there.
Yes. At that.
So Ron and I are on the Board of Adjustments, and it was our first meeting. There were 2 public hearings for variance requests. In both cases, the applicants were in the process of building their structure already or already built it and didn't realize there was a variance request. So the first one was 1271 Reese Street, the Silverton Lodge. They're building a storage shed in the back, and requested a 0-foot setback. We, decided that it lined up with the other structures on Reese Street, so we approved that one. And the second one, it was a variance request for a sauna at 1057 Empire Street. There, for this one, the neighbor came to object, and we heard both sides. After some discussion, we moved for approval. There were 3 people approved, 2 did not. But with the Board of Adjustments, 4 needs approval for it to pass. So we retracted that approval, had more discussion, and tried to come to a conclusion that met both sides. And what we ended up doing was approve the variance with the condition that they move the sauna back about 8 feet in order not to obstruct their neighbor's view.
Thanks.
Good, thank you.
Great. Sorry about that. All right, moving on to trustee reports. I just want to give a huge shout out to staff. Melina, thank you for cooking for the 150th. Anna, I just heard really great things afterwards. I think there were a lot of different types of people there, old timers, newcomers. I think for a community of introverts, it was a lot of activities in one week. So I think that's always something to think about is how much we schedule in one week, because I definitely know there were some school families and kids that didn't come because they were at all of the Makers Market and stuff earlier in the week, but really fun week with the film. If you haven't seen the 150th, go see that. We had a lot of stuff going on last week, but the 150th was a great celebration. So thanks to staff for really making that something the community could get excited about. And to the fellow trustees who enjoyed that lovely fundraising experience, Jim, I hear we were on the front page of the Durango Herald.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got some good sports on this team. And I just want to give a shout out to everybody who showed up and made it successful. And I wanted to spread the word again. We're going to have a Wildlife Coalition meeting on Thursday, this Thursday, the 26th at 6 p.m. at Town Hall. And we'll have representatives from Colorado Parks and Wildlife. We'll have folks from Bear Smart Durango and from Bruin Waste Management. And really, that'll be a chance to kind of get some more information for what community members can do, education they can spread, kind of advocacy pieces they can do. And we'll kind of start to brainstorm and have a follow-up meeting on how do we really activate this coalition to work on this issue. So it's happening on Thursday. That's my trustee report. Anybody else?
I had fun getting pied. I think that was really great. Showed good faith in our community. Do we have any numbers from that?
Oh, we were at the chamber meeting and I think it was around $780.
Okay.
That's great.
That was good effort.
There were 2 minutes it just took for that. So let's think more fundraising.
Oh, and a clarification that it was not it was in the paper that it was my idea. I was promoting a dunk tank, which I now realize would have been very cold. I think it was Amy and Lindsay.
It was Amy.
But Bill was really thankful at the chamber meeting, so I thought I'd pass on that thanks. He really did a shout out to the trustees and the town for the 150th. I was very appreciative of that support. And he said that a number of people donated but didn't want to throw pies. So
Very nice.
$20 for a pie. I'll take that.
That's kind of the point, so.
Any other trustee reports? Jim, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. I wanted to give a shout out to Lucy for representing the town of Silverton and the Dark Sky Initiative at the Business Alliance Thursday down at Ignacio. She did an incredible job representing our community. So way to go, Lucy. Friday, I had a very nice meeting with a concerned citizen who emailed all of us regarding RVs and RV parking around town. Very positive, really wanting to work towards creating a solution that benefits all. So I was very pleased with that. And then the last thing I just wanted to say was our meeting today from 5 to 7. This is the best group of people I have had to work with in a long time. Smart, solution oriented, and I just want to thank each and every one of you. And I'm sorry I'm not there in person.
Thanks,
But
Jim.
sincerely, this team, this group, this makes me proud. And it really is what we discussed. And if anyone has seen that video about the 150, gotta watch it. You gotta see the video.
It's on our town YouTube channel. Anyone can view it at any time.
Our new mission is recruiting unicorns.
That's right.
You're recruiting unicorns.
That's
We
right.
only need about 600 of them. That's it.
I mean, I've been thinking, should we get a town mascot, you know?
Unicorns.
Right? Miners pride.
Mhm.
Thanks, Jim. Appreciate your dedication.
Absolutely.
Sitting there calling in. It makes this job a lot easier. This job can get really thankless and it makes it a lot easier when you have folks that are ready to do the work and be thoughtful and kind about it. All right, moving on from trustee reports to continued business 9A. This is a public hearing. A second reading for adoption of ordinance 2024-08, an ordinance of the town of Silverton amending Article 8, Chapter 10 of the Silverton Municipal Code, opting out of the enforcement of Senate Bill 24-131. So since it is a public hearing, we have staff comments again. and public comment. And yeah, okay, great. Go for it, staff. Anything to add?
Nothing to add.
Okay.
We did receive one public comment. It is in the packet.
Thank you. We don't have any public comment in person. Do we have any public comment online for this particular agenda item? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment. Trustees, any additional comments from when we initially did the initial hearing?
I think my thoughts remain unchanged. I think that it's a good idea for us to adopt this and opt out of this legislation, but I also think that sooner than later, we need to talk about what our policy is around these meetings specifically, because I think that it is so important that this feels like a place where people participate. And I think we have that culture right now, and I don't see any immediate threat to that, but I think that it's in our best interest to have something on the books.
Agreed. I think Tyler stated that well last meeting as well. Staff was directed to, I think, take it to Personnel and Ordinance Committee. All right, any other trustee discussion on this second reading? Okay, well, folks, you know what to do.
Make a motion to adopt ordinance 2024-08 and ordinance of the town of Silverton amending Article 8, Chapter 10 of the Silverton Municipal Code, opting out of the enforcement of Senate Bill 24-131.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Melina.
Trustee Halverson,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee Schnitger,
Yes.
trustee Wakefield,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Pro Tem Harper,
Yes.
Mayor Cranker.
Yes. Great, thank you. All right, moving on to 9B, public hearing. This is a second reading for adoption of ordinance 2024-09, ordinance of the town of Silverton amending chapter 2, article 2, section 110 of the Silverton Municipal Code, repealing the use of Robert's Rules of Order and adopting Bob's Rules of Order as the guiding parliamentary rules for town meetings. Staff, any additional commentary on this?
We didn't receive any public comment.
Great, and we don't have any public comment. Do we have any public comment online? Seeing none, I'll close public comment. Any trustee deliberations on this second reading? Okay.
I was just hoping that someone would run in all breathless. What did it say about Bob's Rules?
I'll make a motion to adopt ordinance 2024-09, an ordinance of the town of Silverton amending chapter 2, article 2, section 110 of the Silverton Municipal Code, repealing the use of Robert's Rules of Order and adopting Bob's Rules of Order as the guiding preliminary rules for town meetings.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Melina.
Trustee Halverson,
Yes.
trustee Gardner,
Yes.
trustee Schnitger,
Yes.
trustee Wakefield,
Yes.
trustee George,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Harper,
Absolutely. Yes.
Cranker.
Yes. Go, Bobby.
I'll have no Bobby.
All right.
That's a whole other one.
Bobby. All right, we have no in-person comment. If there's anybody online who would like to make a public comment, please click the raise hand button and we'll promote you to panel. Seeing none, we'll close public comment. The time is 8:54 and I adjourn this meeting.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you.